to be hospitable, loving what is good, sensible, just, devout, and self-controlled. Empower them to hold fast to your faithful word, for they are unprofitable and worthless. Now may the God of peace, who brought up from the dead the great shepherd of his sheep, through the blood of the eternal covenant, guide and direct us in our duties today and every day. I pray this in the name of Jesus Christ, to whom the glory forever and ever. And the house said, Amen.
If all members and guests will remain standing, will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by the lady from the 52nd, Dr. Saipo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please join me as we recite the 31 words which affirm the values and the freedom that the American flag represents. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members and guests may be seated. Reading of the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Charleston, Thursday, March 18th, 2021.
Gentleman to 51st, Douglas Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
The gentleman from the 51st asks unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read. Are there objections? There are no objections. Lady from the 49th for an update on the calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Special calendar, third reading, committee substitute for House Bill 230 to House calendar. Special calendar, second reading, committee substitute for House Bill 2959 to House calendar.
Introduction of guests. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our doctor of the day is Dr. Ben Perrin from Huntington. If we could please make him welcome.
Reports to standing committees.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration committee substitute for Senate Bill 517 relating to sunset provisions of legislative rules. Reports the same back with amendment with the recommendation that do pass as amended.
Report to be received.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration House Bill 2427 authorizing the Department of Health and Human Resources to promulgate a legislative rule relating to behavioral health centers licensure. Reports back a committee substitute, therefore, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass.
Report to be received.
Originating in the Committee on Education is House Bill 2029 relating to teacher preparation clinical experience programs. It's reported with the recommendation that it do pass.
Report to be received.
Originating in the Committee on Education is House Bill 2030, establishing a nursing program at Concord University. It's reported with recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Report to be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Education has had under consideration House Bill 3177, removing expired, outdated, inoperative, and antiquated provisions and report requirements in education. Reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass.
Report to be received.
Your Committee on Education has had under consideration House Bill 3009, relating to the publication of county board financial statements. Reports back a committee substitute, therefore, with recommendation that the committee substitute do pass.
Report to be received.
Your Committee on Education has had under consideration House Bill 2336, establishing a Katherine Johnson Academy, House Bill 2778, create the education tax credit, and House Bill 2806 to allow parents to retain their child without losing a year of sports eligibility. Reports the same back with amendment with the recommendation that they each do pass as amended, that they be referred to the Committee on Finance.
The report to be received and all bills be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Workforce Development has had under consideration House Bill 3089, make utility workers essential employees during a state of emergency. Reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The report to be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure has had under consideration House Concurrent Resolution 12, Charles E. Jarvis Memorial Bridge, House Concurrent Resolution 17, James C. Vickers Silver Star Highway, House Concurrent Resolution 19, United States Army Private Dallas H. Johnson World War II Memorial Bridge, House Concurrent Resolution 25, William Edward Friesen Memorial Bridge. House Concurrent Resolution 26, Victor Yoke Memorial Bridge. House Concurrent Resolution 27, Harvey LeMasters Memorial Bridge. House Concurrent Resolution 33, Norman A. and Carrie G. Silver Memorial Bridge. And House Concurrent Resolution 38, United States Marine Corps Sergeant David Andrew Green Memorial Bridge. Reports the same back with recommendation that each be adopted, that they be referred to the Committee on Rules.
The report will be received. Those resolutions will be referred to the Committee on Rules.
Originating in the Committee on Health and Human Resources is House Bill 2028, exempting veterinarians from the requirements of controlled substance monitoring. It's reported with recommendation that it do pass.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on Health and Human Resources has had in consideration House Bill 3079 relating to exempting recovery residences from certain standards. It's reported with recommendation that it do pass.
That report will be received.
Your Committee on Judiciary has had in consideration House Bill 2982 relating to the Second Chances at Life Act of 2021 and House Bill 3215 amending the requirements to become an elected prosecutor. Reports by committee substitutes, therefore, with the recommendation that the committee substitutes each do pass.
The report will be received.
Your Committee on Judiciary has had in consideration House Bill 3045 relating to firefighter disability claims, House Bill 3107 declaring that post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosed by a licensed psychiatrist is a compensatable occupational disease for first responders, and House Bill 3164 relating generally to kidnapping. They're reported with recommendation that each do pass.
That report will be received.
Your Joint Committee on Enrolled Bills has examined, found truly enrolled, and on March 18, 2021, presented to His Excellency the Governor for his action, committee substitute for House Bill 2011, eliminating any time requirements for part-time personnel to work during the working year.
That report will be received. Are there further reports of standing committees, reports of select committees, messages from the executive?
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Hanshaw presents a communication from His Excellency the Governor advising that on March 19th he approved committee substitute for House Bill 2001.
That report will be received.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Hanshaw presents a communication from His Excellency the Governor advising that on March 18th, 2021, he approved committee substitute for Senate Bill 270 and committee substitute for Senate Bill 280.
That report will be received.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 11 has become law without the signature of the Governor.
The message will be received. Are there further messages from the executive? If not, messages from the Senate?
The Senate has passed with amendment and a title amendment committee substitute for House Bill 2009 relating to limitations on the use of wages and agency shop fees by employers and labor organizations for political activities.
The message should be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of House Bill 2009 was to limit the uses of wages and agency shop fees by employers and labor organizations for political activities. The Senate amendment, the bill passed out of the House, required a written agreement to allow the deduction of dues or fees from a paycheck if the dues or fees were to be used for political purposes. The Senate, strike and insert, removes any restrictions on how private employers would handle such deductions. The amendment prohibits such deductions from public employees unless the employer is a municipal corporation with a collective bargaining agreement in effect. The amendment also expressly protects rights of employees to join, become members of, contribute to, donate to, or pay fees or dues to a union, labor organization, or club. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move the House concur with the Senate amendment.
The question is on the motion that the House concur in the Senate amendments to committee substitute for House Bill 2009. Is there debate on the bill or the motion? The gentleman from the 17th, Doug Lovejoy, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the majority leader yield?
Yes.
So as I understand your explanation, the bill as it came back from the Senate only applies to public employees?
Yes.
And it's a prohibition on total dues for public employees, not just political money.
Yes, that is correct.
And so that would include, for instance, our police officers.
Yes.
And it would include our firefighters.
Public employees.
And it would include any of our first responders like EMS, EMTs that are organized, say by the
I don't know of any organized.
Well, the UMWA has organized some of the EMT squads, so it would prohibit them from participating in payment of dues.
If they're public employees, correct.
Now, I also understand you mentioned an exemption if there's a collective bargaining agreement in place. Do you have any idea how many CBAs there are in West Virginia?
I do not.
Okay. Also, when I read through the bill, I noticed that supplemental insurances may be affected. Can you explain how they would be affected by this bill?
Yeah, can you show me where that is? Because when I read their bill, I saw how insurance, life insurance and health insurance were, of the benefits allowed to be deducted. Sure.
It's under the Wage Payment Collection Act section. And the specific language that I was focusing on is it said insurance offered by an employer. There is a reference to it under 46A2116. That's a consumer credit protection provision, but also on the authorized deductions. And my focus of this line of questioning will be
because I'm still not seeing you.
Okay, sure. Go to the Wage Payment Collection Act section. That's Article 5.
Yeah, I'm there.
Go to 2151.
Yeah.
And then go to G. And that's what defines deductions.
Yes, the term deductions adds in labor and fees, but it also has in there the, let me find it, provided.
The third line.
The term deductions. So they're not considered a deduction, so they will be done.
Well, it limits it to forms of insurance offered by an employer. So my question would be like, let's say they buy a cancer policy. It's not offered through the employer. It's a deduction that's made by the officer or the public employee, but it's for a supplemental policy. That would be prohibited under this bill.
Okay, counsel's telling me that wouldn't apply if it's not under deduction.
Well, if it is a form of, if it's a benefit that's not offered by the employer, it would fall outside of the definition of an authorized deduction.
That does seem correct, yes.
Okay. So do we have any idea how many public employees have, whether it's AFLAC or cancer policies or life insurance policies, not through the employer but through a third party?
That the employee chose to pick?
Yes.
That they need to pay for?
Yes.
No, I have no idea.
So I also see some language in there that we would be banning our public employees from directing their pay to club dues or fees. What are club dues or fees?
I mean, that seems pretty self-explanatory to me. I'm not sure how you want me to expand on that.
Could you give me three or one examples of a club due?
Could you give me one?
Well, that's my question. I think it's broad enough. It could include, for instance, my deputy sheriffs can pay into the Deputy Sheriff's Association, which is a voluntary.
Oh, that sounds to me like you are correct. Yes,
Okay.
They need to make that check on their own, not have their employer pay that for them.
So a wellness club, like a YMCA or a rec center for wellness programs, would that be permitted?
If not, if it's offered by their employer, you're saying, or the employer has that as a benefit, or they chose this as a benefit themselves, something that they wanted to join.
They chose it, for instance, in the private sector, many businesses will allow like a YMCA corporate discount. And it's completely a contract between the YMCA and the participant.
Oh, you're correct then, yes.
Yeah.
The employee needs to pay for that themselves. They're not going to have the employer taking care of that deduction for them.
Several of our counties allow employees to voluntarily direct their pay into scholarship programs. And there's one called the Scott Memorial Fund, and there's another called the Big Coal Scholarship. Would those be prohibited under this bill?
They are prohibited from the employer doing that for the employee. The employee has to make those arrangements themselves, yes.
Okay. Thank you. May I speak to the motion?
Yes, the gentleman is recognized to speak to the motion.
I think this bill didn't get any better when it went across the hall. And what we're really talking about here is we're prohibiting our public employees, our firemen, okay, our police officers, our EMTs from choosing how they direct their own pay. You know, I mean, that's essentially what we have here. This is a decision that's made by the employee. It's a contract with my employer of where I want my money to go to. I don't think that we should be getting involved, impairing the obligations of contract. And it's not just me that says that. Actually, Article 3, Section 4 of the Constitution of West Virginia says that there shall be no law impairing the obligation of contract. So I think that we're doing a disservice to our first responders and other public employees by eliminating this. And so I would urge us to reject and to reject the motion and to reject the bill.
The question again is on the motion by the lady from the 49th that the House concur in the Senate amendments to Committee Substitute for House Bill 2009. Is there further debate on the motion? If not, those in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. No. Ayes appear to have it. Roll call vote is demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question before the House is the motion by the lady from the 49th that the House concur in the Senate amendments to Committee Substitute for House Bill 2009. Those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 54 ayes, 44 nays, and 2 members absent or not voting. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares that motion adopted. The question now before the House is the passage of the bill as amended by the Senate. Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 55 ayes, 43 nays, and 2 members absent or not voting. The majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. Are there further title amendments? If not, the title as amended by the Senate, concurred in by the House, will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next message from the Senate.
The Senate has passed with amendment and a title amendment. Committee Substitute for House Bill 2263, update the regulation of pharmacy benefit managers.
Lady in the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to update the regulation of the pharmacy benefit manager. The Senate changed the rebate language to reflect that the health benefit plan apply 100% of the rebate to reduce the insurance premiums or rates on a yearly basis for the entire plan. The House language required that the individual receive the rebate at the point of sale by seeing a reduction in his or her copay. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House concur with further amendment. The amendment returns the individual copay reduction in the legislation.
The lady from the 49th moves that the House concur in the Senate amendment with further amendment to Committee Substitute for House Bill 2263. Is there debate on the motion? The gentleman of the 30th is recognized. Delegate Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentlelady yield.
Yes.
Just to clarify what we've done here, we've returned the bill to its original form when it left the House? No. We accepted some of the amendments from the House.
Just the rebate section
So
where they had it.
Everything else that the Senate did to the bill is maintained, and our further amendment simply reverses their decision to give insurance companies the rebate, and where we want the consumer to get the rebate. Would that be a reasonable understanding of what we've done?
That is correct.
Thank you very much.
Is there further debate on the motion? If not, the question is on the adoption of the motion. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The chair declares that motion adopted. The question now then before the House is the passage of the bill as amended by the Senate, further amended by the House. Is there debate on the bill? If not, the question is on passage. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 98 ayes, 0 nays, and 2 members absent or not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2263, update the regulation of pharmacy benefit managers.
Are there further title amendments? If not, the title as amended by the Senate, concurred in by the House, will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next message from the Senate.
The Senate has passed with amendment and a title amendment. Committee substitute for House Bill 2372, allow pre-candidacy papers to be filed the day after the general election.
That message will be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate amendment clarifies the language of the bill to state that pre-candidacy papers may be filed the day after the election for offices with terms of 4 years or less. The Senate title amendment reflects that change. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move the House concur with the Senate amendment and title amendment.
The lady from the 49th moves that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment to committee substitute for House Bill 2372. Is there debate on the motion? If not, those in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. The question now before the House is the passage of the bill as amended by the Senate, concurred in by the House. Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 98 ayes, 0 nays, and 2 members absent or not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2372, allow pre-candidacy papers to be filed the day after the general election.
Are there further amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill or next message from the Senate.
The Senate has passed with amendment. Committee substitute for House Bill 2616, amend the reporting to the governor and the legislature to have information continuously available on the Office of Health Facility Licensure and Certifications website.
Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All the Senate amendment did was remove an incorrect code citation. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move the House concur with the Senate amendment.
The question's on the motion that the House concur in the Senate amendment. Is there debate on the motion? If not, those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have. The chair declares the motion adopted. The question now before the House is the passage of the bill. Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 98 ayes, 0 nays, and 2 members absent or not voting. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2616, amend the reporting to the governor and the legislature to have information continuously available on the Office of Health Facility Licensure and Certifications website.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next Senate message.
The Senate has passed with amendment and a title amendment and changed the effective date to July 1, 2021. Committee substitute for House Bill 2682 relating to the issuance of license suspensions to insurance producers and insurance adjusters who have failed to meet continuing education requirements.
Lady from the 49th, the message to be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you. That the title explained the bill. The Senate amendment to this bill is stylistic and non-substantive. Title amendment has stylistic changes and clarifies the requirement that the insurance commissioner maintain certain information. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move the House concur with the Senate amendment and title amendment.
The lady from the 49th moves that the House concur in the Senate amendment and title amendment to committee substitute for House Bill 2682. Is there debate on the motion? If not, those in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have. The chair declares the motion adopted. The question now before the House is the passage of the bill. Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 96 ayes, 2 nays, and 2 members absent or not voting. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. Clerk will please report the title.
Committee Substitute for House Bill 2682, relating to the issuance of license suspensions to insurance producers and insurance adjusters who have failed to meet continuing education requirements.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the bill become effective July 1st, 2021.
The motion is that House Bill, Committee Substitute for House Bill 2682 be made effective July 1st, 2021. Those in favor of that motion will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 97 ayes, 1 nay, and 2 members absent or not voting. 2/3 of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill effective July 1st, 2021. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next Senate message.
The Senate has passed Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 562, relating to juvenile competency proceedings.
Message to be received.
The Senate has passed Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 566, relating to interpretations of school laws.
The message to be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has adopted Senate Concurrent Resolution 16, United States Marine Corps Corporal Roger Lee Booth Memorial Road.
The message to be received and the resolution will be referred to the Committee on Technology and Infrastructure and the Committee on Rules. Are there further messages from the Senate? If not, resolutions.
House Resolution 16, urge Congress to allow vehicles traveling on interstate highways in West Virginia to have same maximum gross vehicle weight and axle configuration as currently permissible for vehicles traveling on U.S. routes in West Virginia.
Lady in the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with and that each resolution be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the delegate console system.
The lady from the 49th asks unanimous consent that the further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with and that each resolution be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the delegate console system. Are there objections? There are no objections. Petitions, motions, bills introduced, unfinished business, bills on third reading.
Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 469, permitting and establishing requirements for appearance by video for purposes of notarial acts.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman in 32nd, Douglas Fast, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of Senate Bill 469 is to modernize the notary laws in West Virginia by creating statutory authority for remote notarization. It allows for 2 methods of electronic notarization: remote online notarization and remote ink notarization. This brings West Virginia in line with the latest version of the revised Uniform Law on Notarial Acts, which has been passed by a number of states. That is a summary, Mr. Speaker. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 98 ayes, 0 nays, and 2 members absent or not voting. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 469, permitting and establishing requirements for appearance by video for a purpose of notarial acts.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee Substitute for House Bill 2174, West Virginia Monument and Memorial Protection Act of 2021.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman from the 29th, Douglas Steele, to explain the bill.
Mr. Speaker, this bill was advanced to third reading with the right to amend.
Gentleman is correct. Are there amendments?
Delegates Pushkin, Fluharty, Rowe, Zukoff, and Young are moved to amend the bill. This is HFA Pushkin, Fluharty, Rowe, Zukoff, and Young 3-18.
Does the gentleman from the 37th wish to explain the amendment? Gentleman is recognized for that purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This simply removes school
from the school from the bill, so the ability to change names of school would still rest with the elected local school boards. I reserve the right to close.
The question now before the House is the amendment just explained by the gentleman from the 37th. Is there debate on the amendment? The gentleman from the 29th, Douglas Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We actually have, since the bill passed out of committee, have been in conversations with individuals within the West Virginia School Authority and so forth, and looking at the nature of how rules are promulgated and things like that, there could raise some issues in making changes to schools, like doing energy management programs and things like that, this bill could interfere with the school board being able to make those changes. So I would actually support this amendment. I think it's helpful to the bill altogether, and clarifies that schools will still be able to maintain their properties without having to go to another separate office to do that. So I would support the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further debate on the amendment? If not, the gentleman from 37th, close debate on the amendment. The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Those in favor will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The chair declares that amendment adopted. Clerk will report the next amendment.
Delegate Young moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Young 3-19.
The question before the House is the amendment. Does the lady from the 35th wish to explain the amendment? Are there objections? There are no objections. Ladies recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All this amendment does, if you guys are looking at the bill, it's on the last page. Currently, it says that only an entity that's controlling the public property on which an item, structure, or area may petition the State Historic Preservation Office for a permit. All the amendment does is says that a citizen or citizens of West Virginia may petition for removal to that entity first, and then if that entity does it, then the entity will apply for the permit through the State Historic Preservation Office. I had an issue with it being a First Amendment violation of the public not being able to have a say in this at all. So yeah, hope you'll support it. Thank you.
The question is the adoption of the amendment just explained. The gentleman from the 29th, Douglas Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would actually support this amendment. If you look at what it's doing, with the bill coming out of committee, the entity itself would be the only thing that could apply to make a change to some type of historical artifact or property. What this does is it provides, as the gentlelady said, a method by which the citizen first could petition the locality. So let's say a citizen group petitioned the Logan County Commission in regards to a Devil Anse Hatfield statue. And let's say the Logan County Commission turned them down, that we're not going to pursue a permit to move or otherwise alter that monument. Then that citizen group could seek to go to the State Historic Preservation Office if the Logan County Commission didn't do it. So at that point, the State Historic Preservation Office would, of course, you'll find out later on, the bill will promulgate rules to have a hearing and things like that on it. So I actually think this helps the bill out. It helps. One of the things in the public hearing that did come up a lot was the inability for regular citizens to have a path to do this. So I think overall it strengthens the bill, and I would urge its adoption.
Is there further debate on the amendment? If not, the question is the adoption of the amendment. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. No. Ayes appear to have it. Division's been demanded. Those in favor of adoption will raise one hand. Okay, lower those hands. Those opposed will raise one hand. If the ayes do have it, the amendment is adopted. Clerk will report the next amendment.
Delegates Hornbuckle, Walker, Pushkin, Fluharty, Young, and Hanson move to amend the bill. This is HFA Hornbuckle, Walker, Pushkin, Fluharty, Young, and Hanson 3-18.
The question is on the adoption of the amendment. Is there objection to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read? If not, does a sponsor wish to explain the amendment? If gentleman from the 16th, Dr. Hornbuckle, to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the clerk please read the...
Yes, clerk will read the amendment.
Delegates Hornbuckle, Walker, Pushkin, Fluharty, Young, and Hanson move to amend the committee substitute for House Bill 2174 on page 3, section 8C, line 43, following the word office by inserting the words for state-owned or leased property or the governing body of a local political subdivision for its owned or leased property, and on page 3, section 8C, line 45, following the word office by inserting the words for state-owned or leased property or the governing body of a local political subdivision for its owned or leased property.
Okay, the question is on the adoption of the amendment just read. Is there debate on the amendment? Gentleman the 16th, Delegate Hornbuckle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this amendment is seeking to do is to make sure that any property owned by our state would have to go, as the bill states, through the Historic Preservation Office. But if there is something that is owned by a local subdivision or county, then that entity would have to go through them to petition for any type of removal. I reserve the right to close.
The question is on adoption of the amendment. The gentleman the 29th, Delegate Steele.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I have a question of the chair. Given the passage of the prior amendment that would create a mechanism for citizens to apply to a local municipality, like in this amendment, and that municipality didn't comply, that amendment allowed the citizen to go to the State Historic Preservation Commission. In this amendment, it would foreclose that. So I believe these amendments are now conflicting with the passage of the prior amendment.
It would be the ruling of the chair that the amendments may conflict as a matter of law. They do not, however, conflict as a matter of parliamentary procedure. So the chair will allow debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman is recognized.
For the same reasons that I spoke about the prior amendment, this one I would actually have to oppose now, because I thought that the last amendment set up a pretty clean procedure for regular citizens to apply to a municipality, and if they were turned down, then they could apply to the State Historic Preservation Office. This amendment would undo that and actually take the vast majority of monuments throughout the state and put them back in the hands of just the local municipality alone. So for that reason, I would oppose this amendment.
Is there further debate on the amendment? The gentleman did reserve the right to close debate. Does the gentleman wish to be recognized?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After listening to my colleague, I would ask for unanimous consent to withdraw my amendment.
Other objections? There are no objections. That amendment will be withdrawn. Clerk will please report the next amendment.
Delegates Hornbuckle, Rowe, and Fluharty move to amend the bill. This is HFA Hornbuckle, Rowe, and Fluharty 3-18.
Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read? If not, does a sponsor wish to explain the amendment? Yes, gentleman from 16th, Delegate Hornbuckle.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There was language in this bill that seemed like an arbitrary number and date. Couldn't find any significance to it. Though just to improve the bill on efficiency, I would ask that we take out that language for that date. And I reserve the right to close.
For purposes of clarity, the clerk will read the amendment.
Delegates Hornbuckle, Rowe, and Fluharty move to amend committee substitute for House Bill 2174 on page 1, section 8C, line 7, by striking out the words, "the war between the states," and inserting in lieu thereof the words, "the American Civil War."
Okay, the question now before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Is there debate on the amendment? The question is on the amendment just read by the clerk. Gentleman from 16th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To re-explain the amendment that I now have in front of me, we had some confusion there, simply just to take out the war between the states and then insert the American Civil War, and ask for the right to close.
Okay, the question is on that amendment. Is there debate? The gentleman from 29th, Delegate Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The war between the states and the American Civil War, to me, would be interchangeable. Whatever the the body would want to do here, I would be open to. I don't think it harms the bill. I don't think it helps the bill. I think more people do probably call it the American Civil War rather than the war between the states, but this is totally a preference of lexicon. And, you know, for that reason, I'm ambivalent towards it.
Teach gentleman from the 36, Doggett Road.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The difference is important. The war between the states was the term used by the Confederates during and after the Civil War. The American Civil War has become accepted as the true name of that great event in American history. So I think we're really out of step and out of tune by having the name War Between the States. It's antiquated and doesn't really appropriately address what West Virginia's position was during that war as a part of the American Civil War rather than the war between the states. I'd urge adoption of the amendment.
Is there further debate on the amendment? If not, the gentleman of the 16th did reserve the right to close debate. Does the gentleman wish to be recognized? The question is on the adoption of the amendment. Those in favor of the amendment will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. No. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes have it. Chair declares that amendment adopted. The clerk will report the next amendment.
Delegates Hornbuckle, Fluharty, and Young move to amend the bill. This is HFA Hornbuckle, Fluharty, and Young 3-18.
Does the sponsor wish to have the amendment read or explained? Clerk will read the amendment.
Delegates Hornbuckle, Fluharty, and Young move to amend the committee substitute for House Bill 2174 on page 3, section 8C, lines 50 through 53, following the subsection E designation by striking out the following. This section shall apply to items, structures, or areas described in subsection B in existence prior to January 1, 1970, and those lawfully erected, named, or dedicated on or after January 1st, 1970.
The question is on the adoption of the amendment just read by the clerk. Is there debate on the amendment? Gentleman from the 29th, Douglas Steele.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I do not oppose this amendment. This is a decent amendment. The provisions in subsection E1 referring to dates before and after January 1st, 1970, we found by legal research to be unnecessary. The provision was apparently included to cover both statutorily historical monuments on a federal level, which are more than 50 years old, as well as those erected after the 50-year threshold. This bill would have no bearing on a federal monument on federal land. So that definition, or I should say that provision, is unnecessary. Further, Curator Reed Smith testified that his organization is not bound by the federal historical registry threshold, and thus this provision is unnecessary, and he even cited the example of the New River Gorge Bridge being included in that far before the 50-year mark. So it does no harm to the bill, and I'd support it.
Is there further debate on the amendment? If not, the question is, shall the amendment be adopted? Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. Chair declares that amendment adopted. The clerk will please report the next amendment.
Delegates Hornbuckle, Fluharty, Hansen, and Young move to amend the bill. This is HFA Hornbuckle, Fluharty, Hansen, and Young 3-18. Delegates Hornbuckle, Fluharty, Hansen, and Young move to amend the committee substitute for House Bill 2174 on page 3, section 8C, line 70, following the period by inserting line 60, following the period by inserting the following. Any Civil War-related monument, memorial, nameplate, or plaque that is removed pursuant to this section shall be donated to the Guyandotte Civil War Days Incorporated, located in Guyandotte, West Virginia, for retention and display at its museum or upon museum grounds.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment just read by the clerk. The gentleman of the 29th, Douglas Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the surface, I can understand the direction given, but at the same time, if we look at the various and differing Civil War reenactment societies and Civil War museums throughout the state, the way this bill would operate without the amendment is the State Historic Preservation Office would determine the appropriate place to move that monument or name plate or plaque or whatever. So if something was relevant to, say, Mercer County, it wouldn't make sense to move it to Guyandotte, and possibly there could be something in Mercer County that those folks have a museum down there that they'd like to keep it in. And it could be the same thing with Berkeley County, may have, you know, a monument that it makes more sense to move it to a Berkeley County museum. Directing that every Civil War monument be sent to Guyandotte, while I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I think it would impede the State Historic Preservation Office's ability to move those items to more appropriate places that have a more bearing on their locale. So I would personally oppose it.
Is there further debate on the amendment? If not, the question is on the amendment. Those in favor of the amendment will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. Noes appear to have it. Noes do have it. The chair declares that amendment lost. Are there further? Yes, clerk will report the next amendment.
Delegates Fluharty, Scaff, Hanson, Rowe, and Walker move to amend committee substitute for House Bill 2174 on page 2, section 8C, line 13, following the word disturbed by striking out the period and inserting a colon and the following proviso: provided that this subsection does not apply to a statue, monument, memorial, nameplate, plaque, school, street, bridge, building, park, preserve, or reserve, which has been erected, named, or dedicated in honor of events in our military history, that honors any person, group, or event that owns slaves or was motivated by racism, bigotry, or hate against our citizens, our form of government, or its institutions.
The question is on adoption of the amendment just read by the clerk. Is there debate on the amendment? The gentleman of the 29th, Douglas Steele, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do oppose this amendment. If we look at that, at the very end of the amendment, or was motivated by racism, bigotry, or hate against our citizens, our form of government, or its institutions. This could include Revolutionary War monuments in our state. Our form of government at the time was a monarchy from England. You know, this is far too broadly written, and it's very subjective. What is racism today may not have been racism a long time ago. Maybe it means different things to other people. This introduces a very subjective standard into the bill that can have a lot of adverse consequences. I think about the mine wars in the labor movement at Matewan, and those men and women that donned that red handkerchief were firing upon National Guardsmen and state troopers. So tear that monument down as well with this amendment. So for that reason, I oppose the amendment, Mr. Speaker, and I urge its rejection.
The gentleman from the 44th, Douglas Hannah, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to speak to this one too because I think there could be an unwanted spin played on this one. So, I mean, if you look at the amendment here, it says own slaves. And, I mean, we have 12 presidents who's owned slaves. 8 of those owned slaves while they were in office. I mean, Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Jackson. I mean, the first president, the president who wrote the Declaration of Independence, the founder of the modern Democratic Party. Those are all men that did great things that we're going to rip their statues down. You look at the second part of this amendment, and this concerns me even more. It says, or was motivated by racism, bigotry, or hate against our citizens, our form of government, or its institutions. Mr. Speaker, if we adopt this portion of the amendment, we're going to have to send it back to finance, because who knows how much it's going to cost to rip Robert C. Byrd's name off of every building in this state. So I think it's just a slippery slope, and it's a ridiculous idea. I would urge rejection of this amendment.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from the 37th, Douglas Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to remind the body of what we're talking about here, and that it would not cost a dime It would not need to be sent back to finance because we're not talking about tearing anything down. It would simply keep them under current law where nothing has been torn down. So it doesn't say we would have to remove them. It says it would simply be under the process they're under right now. This amendment wouldn't change anything for those monuments that my friend just mentioned.
Is there further debate on the amendment? A roll call is demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment as read by the clerk and shown on the screen. Those in favor of the motion or of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 24 ayes, 74 nays, 2 members absent or not voting. Less than a majority in the affirmative. Chair declares that amendment lost. The clerk will report the next amendment.
Delegates Pinson, Buckheimer, Foster, Martin, and Phillips move to amend the bill on page 2, section 8C, line 34, following the conclusion of subdivision 5 by inserting a new subsection to read as follows. No statue, monument, memorial, nameplate, plaque, historical flag display, school, street, bridge, building, park, preserve, or reserve, which has been erected for or named or dedicated in honor of events of historical religious significance and is located on public property may be relocated, removed, altered, renamed, rededicated, or otherwise disturbed, and renumbering the remaining sections subdivision accordingly.
The question is on the amendment just read by the clerk. The gentleman, 29th, Douglas Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just very quickly, I'd ask the lead sponsor to yield.
Gentleman, 13th.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. We had discussed this before. With the passage of the very first amendment regarding schools, would you be open to reforming this to remove the word school?
Yes, sir. Mr. Speaker, I do ask unanimous consent to reform my amendment in line with the now amended bill by removing the word school.
To be clear, the effect of the gentleman's amendment would be to strike the word school from the first line of the now new subsection 6 of the amendment?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Are there objections to that reformation? There are no objections. The reformation will be noted by the clerk. The question is still on the now reformed amendment. Is there a debate on the reformed amendment? Gentleman 29th, Douglas Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do support this amendment. This would protect monuments of historical religious significance that is sufficiently broad that it wouldn't run into an equal protection issue, and would protect religious artifacts and monuments that could be on public property throughout the state. So I would urge the body to adopt the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further debate on the amendment? If not, the question is on adoption of the amendment. Roll call vote is demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question is, shall the amendment be adopted? Those in favor of adoption of the amendment as read by the clerk and reformed by the gentleman, the 13th, will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 97 ayes, 1 nay, and 2 members absent or not voting. A majority having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the clerk will read the bill a third time as amended.
Committee Substitute for House Bill 2174, West Virginia Monument and Memorial Protection Act of 2021.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman from the 29th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of House Bill 2174 is to prohibit the relocation, removal, alteration, renaming, rededication, or other disturbance of any statue, monument, memorial, nameplate, or plaque which is located on public property other than schools and has been erected for or named or dedicated in honor of a certain historical military, civil rights, Native American, or religious figures or organizations, or to the labor movement. The bill also establishes a process process by which the West Virginia Historic Preservation Office may grant permits under certain circumstances. Given the way that the bill was amended, I would like to briefly explain what this permit process would look like for the benefit of the members. The permit process, based on the gentlelady's amendment, would involve that a citizen or citizen group could petition a locality for removal of a monument or renaming or something of that nature. At that point, the entity, say it was the Raleigh County Commission, would have to decide whether they were going to apply to the State Historic Preservation Commission or if they would not. If they will not, then that allows the citizen or citizen group to go to the State Historic Preservation Commission themselves. Still, under this bill, the only entity making or issuing a permit for removal, renaming, altering, or otherwise changing any of the defined items here is the State Historic Preservation Commission. It does not empower a locality to make that change on their own. So I just want to make sure the members understood the change that happened in that bill. It merely provided an avenue for citizens to petition their local government to apply for a permit, not allow the local government to move it themselves. So with that, just want to point out a few things. There are 5 enumerated, now 6 enumerated categories that would include historical, military events, figures, organizations, and units, the labor union activity and mine wars, the African American Civil Rights Movement, the Native Americans or American Indians, natural disasters or other catastrophic accidents like the Silver Bridge collapse or something of that nature, as well as religious monuments or artifacts on public property. And the State Historic Preservation Office is authorized by statute to promulgate rules to establish procedures for which people could apply for permits and how they would be granted. Mr. Speaker, that is the bill, and I urge adoption.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman from the 67th, Douglas Doyle, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. About a dozen years after the Civil War was over, some of these statues began to be erected. It was part of something called the Lost Cause Movement. And the purpose of the Lost Cause Movement was to let newly freed African Americans know that as far as they were concerned, those white supremacists who had supported the Confederate cause did not believe them to be citizens, even though the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution said clearly that they were citizens. It was all part of an attempt, in particular, to keep them from voting, also to keep them from owning businesses. And the idea is, if all these statues went up over the South and the border states, some noble people like Stonewall Jackson, but others of some pretty nasty characters, black people would in fact be intimidated from participating as citizens. It worked. This was an early version of cancel culture. The African American culture was canceled by the erection of these statues. They must come down, and that is why we must defeat this bill. Thank you.
The lady from the 51st, Douglas Fleischauer, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 things stand out to me about this bill. We've had some discussion about the Confederacy, but I think we are avoiding talking about the real issue. This is about Confederate monuments, and it's hard to escape the fact that the Confederacy was about a group of people who wanted to and did own human beings. They owned human beings, and they were allowed to beat them. They profited from this ownership. They used their religion to say that it was legitimate to own human beings. And then they were willing to tear our country apart so they could maintain this ownership of human beings. It is a stain on our country. It's a stain on the whole world because slavery continues in places. But that is one of the main things that stands out about this bill, that this was motivated by an attempt to preserve monuments to the Confederacy. The other thing that stands out to me about this bill is we still don't have a good process for dealing with historic objects on state property. It is obvious the Civil War is part of our history. That's obvious. There's nobody's going to deny the Civil War is part of our history. But there are guidelines that aren't in this legislation that from the National Historic Preservation Society that we should be thinking about. What does stewardship mean, and what interests need to be balanced if we are being good stewards? We need to consider changing values. For example, in 1946, Congress named the Custer Battlefield. Our values changed, and now that is called the Little Bighorn National Monument. We need to have a broad consultation, and that is one of the most important things that our local historic preservation, our state historic preservation office, that is required by federal law under historic preservation, and we haven't done that. We also need to consider a range of alternatives. We don't need to tear something down. That Stonewall Jackson statute that we're really talking about has already been moved 3 times. And so we need to think about the range of places, the range, whether it needs to be in that place of prominence or not. And lastly, that's an opportunity for public education. We can educate the public, we can educate our children about how West Virginia was created and how our state and different parts of our state were involved and so on. So I do appreciate the gentleman from Raleigh and the leadership for going along with some of these amendments that make the bill better, but I still think that it has problems. We really shouldn't be talking about anything other than state property. We shouldn't be micromanaging municipalities and counties that have historical monuments. That's ridiculous. And it's also ridiculous because the State Historic Preservation Office doesn't have any money to handle this, to handle the issues that would come up regarding state property or municipal or county. That they don't have that. They have federal funding, they have jobs for people, there's nothing extra in their budget that would handle this big thing. So what I believe, and also the bill doesn't really set up a process by which any of this is going to happen. I think it's improved, but we still don't know, is somebody going to investigate, or is there going to be any staff? There's a lot of big gaps in the process. Is there a conflict between the Capitol Building Commission and the State Historic Preservation in terms of decision making? So what I think we should do when we have an issue, in the old days before the pandemic, we studied problems in interims. And I would like to suggest that this is a good topic for us to study in interims. When it is safe to have interims, which I think it is now, because obviously we are here participating in the legislative process, this would be a good topic for a study resolution. I am going to work on drafting one. I would appreciate anybody else who's interested in getting together with me and coming up with this, and I think that we need to have a process about which there is consensus for dealing with historical objects, monuments, areas, and so on. So I urge rejection of the bill and that we consider those 2 issues. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 51st, Doug Williams, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A few weeks ago, I rose on the floor of this House to talk about a couple of bills that we took up that day, which I said would help draw young people to the state of West Virginia. And I told you how happy I was to see those bills. Now, just a couple days later, a couple weeks later, I stand before you as a young person who sees a bill like this and sees the door slowly shutting on our opportunities to bring young people here. When we try to put our best face forward and our best foot forward to bring young people to West Virginia, to say, hey, this is a good place. This is a place that's on the up and up. We're going forward, moving into the 21st century. This is the type of legislation that negates those types of claims. But I don't want to be crass and just say that this is about economics and driving economic investment in the state of West Virginia. I want to talk about what's behind this, the cancel culture that we see in our country. And I will agree there are aspects of cancel culture that I disagree with, that I find unpalatable. But I want to talk about cancel culture in the 19th century, which was to cancel life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for hundreds of millions of individuals simply because of the color of their skin. To cancel them as a person and say you only count as 3/5 of one person. And the individuals that this bill is protecting, who stand gleaming in bronze, looking dignified and brave, their cause was one that was to cancel the lives of hundreds of millions of Americans. And I'll say that again, Americans. And it is unpalatable and unthinkable that we would act to dignify their cause. I urge rejection. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 19th, Delegate Griffith, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I love history, and I visited Fredericksburg, Virginia. There in December of 1862, on Marie's Heights, the Army of Northern Virginia, led by Robert E. Lee, slaughtered soldiers of the Union Army during the Civil War. Well, they caused over 12,000 casualties of Union soldiers during their 11 assaults to try to preserve the Union. Among the men defending that flag were the people who were defending the flag that we pledge to every day. That's the flag they were defending. And although we were not then yet a state of West Virginia, the 7th West Virginia Infantry Unit was there and sustained some of those losses. And during those cold nights, the wounded down and below Marie Heights were pinned down and unable to receive aid, and they suffered tremendously. And during the Union retreat, and this is important to me, during the Union retreat, Stonewall Jackson saw the destruction to the town, and his words were these: kill them all. That's who we are directly or indirectly honoring. I understand the pride that we as West Virginians have that we might have a notable person or even a general who's famous from our state. But there's no monument in Connecticut for Benedict Arnold, but there's two on this campus to Stonewall Jackson. I don't think we should support a bill which inhibits what we're saying. It's not even so much cancel culture as what we ought to have is correction culture. Tell the truth. Tell the whole story. Was he a great general? Of course. But the intent is to protect that man's honor, who said about American patriots, which we in this body recognize all the time: kill them all. I do not support this. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 36th, Delegate Barrick.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Let's all be honest here. We all know what this is about. Why did this bill come up right now? I mean, after all these years, we know it's because we started to have the protests about Stonewall Jackson statues here on the Capitol grounds. That's all that this is about. And that's why we're doing it right now. And that's the question. Do we want to preserve this while other states are not? I just want to point out the statue of Stonewall Jackson was commissioned in 1909 here, and it wasn't paid for by West Virginia Historical Society. It was paid for by the Daughters of the Confederacy. They were trying to keep their legacy going, and they're using this location right here to keep their legacy intact. I want to also mention that the statue is here since 1909. In 1935, we put up another statue here on the Capitol grounds, Abraham Lincoln. So Stonewall Jackson has been here for about a quarter of a century longer than the person responsible for starting our state. So I think our priorities are a little bit twisted on this. Voting for this is more of an issue of character right now. I'm asking you that. If you're voting to protect the Confederacy, that's something you have to ask yourself about. Is this what we really want to do? Was I raised correctly? I mean, this is something that you need to ask yourself. You have to reach down deep because when someone goes past the statue of Stonewall Jackson, a lot of people are hurt by this, and they're very deeply offended, and that bothers me. I don't want to put up a monument to honor someone that is deeply causing a lot of pain for a lot of people still. And this also lets businesses, people outside the state, and as mentioned before, young people in West Virginia know that this is not the kind of place they might be interested in relocating to or in remaining as residents. It's a symbol of racism, slavery, and treason. Stonewall Jackson was a traitor who waged war against this country. Now, I know that there's one argument that I've heard many times that, states should not turn their backs on their history. My answer to that is, maybe we should start relearning our history a little bit better, because last I checked, West Virginia was not part of the Confederacy. So, in fact, we were started because of that. And also, Stonewall Jackson, I want to point out, died in May of 1863. He died before West Virginia even existed. So he technically never even set foot in this state. He was born in Virginia. He died in Virginia. And he fought with Virginia against the United States and West Virginia in the Civil War. So my point is, maybe we should give him back to Virginia. Oh, wait, they don't want him. The mayor of Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy, recently
Point of order.
Had his statue removed.
Gentlelady, let me state her point.
His personalities about the bill are not reflective of what we're talking about.
I disagree. I'll remind you to stay to the bill itself, please. Thank you.
But
you may proceed.
Thank you very much, but I think that's exactly what we're talking about. In any event, I just want to point out one more thing about Stonewall Jackson. He was killed by friendly fire, whatever that means. Wasn't that friendly to him, but he was killed by his own troops. My point is, this is going to do a lot of damage to the state putting this message out. If you press the green button, you're turning the gun right back on us. West Virginia is about to take a bullet from some of its own. I strongly urge everyone to vote no on this. Thank you very much.
Gentleman from the 17th, Delegate Lovejoy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to briefly discuss 2 points on this bill, and that is the debate we're having, which is not only legitimate, but I'll submit to you it's necessary. And then second, the decision and who should make it. I come to you, Mr. Speaker, as the son of a West Virginia public school teacher. Dad was a West Virginia history teacher, which means I spent most summers at Droop Mountain instead of Myrtle Beach. And I didn't like it much then, but I learned a whole lot. And one of the things I learned when we're talking about history is you got to take it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I was taught that context is so important when we discuss history. So for me, I have to come in and look in the context. Is it not a legitimate question to look at when a lot of these monuments we were talking about here today with this bill were put? Were they put in there to send a political message to any specific group of our American brothers and sisters. Now, if you made a line across there, and it's a timeline, and you looked at when all of these monuments were put up, you would see two huge spikes. One of them would be from 1900 to 1920. Then there would be a huge spike from 1954 to 1968. Now, the 1900 piece, which is important, was the Jim Crow era. About 4 years followed Plessy versus Ferguson, and it was the time period when the NAACP was founded, all right? When you go to the second time period, Mr. Speaker, that's the Civil Rights era, all right? So we have Brown versus the Board of Education in 54. We have the Little Rock Nine in 57. Ruby Bridges, I think that was, she was in 1960 down in Louisiana. James Meredith there at the University of Mississippi in 62. We had George Wallace standing in the doors of the schoolhouse in 63, and of course the Civil Rights Act of 64, voting rights 65, and the death of Dr. King in 68. So we have this first period of these monuments during the Jim Crow period when the laws, including laws passed in this very room at these desks, were passed to disenfranchise our black brothers and sisters from the process. And then we have the second period when the civil rights movement is pushing back. And that context tells me that it is a legitimate debate of what do we do with some of these monuments. Ask yourself if it is a fair debate whether some of these monuments were placed to intimidate and disenfranchise. If you will concede the point that that's a fair and legitimate debate, and I submit to you it is, then the question is, who makes the decision? Should the decision about Lewisburg's public square, or Kingwood's public square, or Huntington's public square be made by the people of Huntington, or Kingwood, or Lewisburg, or Clarksburg, or should it be made by 100 politicians over in Charleston? We talk a lot about principles in this place, and there is one called local control. I'll tell you that I think the people of Huntington should decide Huntington's public square, that the people of Kanawha County should have the say in Kanawha County's public square, not me. I'm elected to come here and represent my district, okay? I'm not here to become the culture czar, to become the monument police. I'm here to have people back home make those decisions. And I think that's the principle that we need to look at. So I think if you ask yourself, do we have a legitimate debate and who should decide it, you'll come to the conclusion that this bill is not the way to go. And I will oppose it for that reason, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 51st, Delegate Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my friend from Cabell County just stated, this is a bill about local control. Despite the Young amendment that we passed a few minutes ago, counties and cities still don't have the ability under this bill to make their own decision to remove or rename a statue or a monument or a street or a bridge or a building or a long list of other things that fall under their control. And this is one of a long list of bills that have passed this House, or at least passed out of committee. We started with plastic straws and plastic bags. We moved on to user fees and not allowing us to fully fund our police departments. And now we're telling local cities that they can't make decisions about names of their own streets. Is that really what we were sent here to do? And if there's any doubt about whether this bill is about the Confederacy, we offered an amendment in committee. I offered an amendment in committee to clarify that, which was voted down on a party line vote. This is about the Confederacy. There's a Stonewall Jackson bust down in between my office and where I enter the building every day. I walk by it on my way into work and out of work every day. And I'm not happy that it's there. I wish we could remove it and place it in a museum. That's where I think it belongs. It offends me that that bust is placed in a position where it's sanctioned by the state of West Virginia and honored by the state of West Virginia instead of treated as a historical monument. But that's just me. That bust is between my office and my friend and colleague from the 51st office, the only female black member of this body. In fact, it's much closer to her office. I can't even imagine how she feels when she walks by that bust 10 or 20 times a day. So to me, this bill, yes, it's about local control and preemption, but it's also about empathy. Have you talked to people who are impacted by this bill? Have you asked them how they feel about it and really considered their feelings and their thoughts on this bill? It's about empathy, and I think we need a little bit more empathy in this body. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 37th, Delegate Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I park my car every morning and then walk into the building over here on Canal Boulevard on the south side of the building. I walk by a statue that I'm very proud to have here on the Capitol grounds, and it makes me proud to walk by. And it's of, you know, the very first Republican president, possibly the greatest president this country's ever had, and that's Abraham Lincoln. And towards the end of the Civil War, he made a speech that appealed to the better angels of our nature. And the reason I oppose this bill is I honestly feel that this is an appeal to the lower demons of our nature. I think that this is a cynical attempt to drum up the base, a red meat bill. When I think, who does it help? Well, it's for protection of inanimate objects. And it also might help a few people. People might think it might help them in their re-election bid. But it also hurts people. It's not a harmless bill. And if you think that this isn't hurtful or harmful to folks, I'd beg to differ. I believe there's folks in each and every one of our districts that this is harmful to. And you might not hear them, but they matter. And you might not see them, but they matter. And their opinions and how it makes them feel matters to me. That's why I think just throwing out a red meat bill like this, you know, there are days, many days since I was first elected, that I wake up during session and I can't wait to get here and come to work. Many days. Today is not one of those days. I didn't want to come here today because of this bill, because I knew what we were going to be debating. Spending this much time debating a bill protecting inanimate objects meant to glorify the evil institution of slavery in order to drum up the base. It's disgusting. Sometimes, my friend from the 51st was talking about empathy. It's something we should all practice. Sometimes when I walk by the bust of Thomas Stonewall Jackson down near our office, I think, you know, how would I feel if that was a statue of Erwin Rommel? What's the similarities? They're both generals who fought to protect evil institutions. So there are a lot of things I could say about this, but I think that they couldn't be more powerful than the words of Frederick Douglass, who, in his infinite wisdom, predicted this day. And had a very, very pertinent speech that he gave on Decoration Day, May 30th, 1871, in Arlington Cemetery, in front of a monument to the unknown dead soldier of the unknown dead of the Civil War. And Frederick Douglass said on that day, "We are sometimes asked, in the name of patriotism, to forget the merits of this fearful struggle, and to remember with equal admiration those who struck at the nation's life and those who struck to save it, those who fought for slavery and those who fought for liberty and justice. I am no minister of malice. I would not strike the fallen. I would not repeal the repentant, But may my right hand forget her cunning and my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth if I forget the difference between the parties to that terrible, protracted, and bloody conflict. If we ought to forget a war which has filled our land with widows and orphans, which has made stumps of men of the very flower of their youth, which has sent them on the journey of life armless, legless, maimed, and mutilated, which has piled up a debt heavier than a mountain of gold, swept unaccounted thousands of men into bloody graves, and planted agony at 1,000,000 of hearthstones. I say, if this war is to be forgotten, I ask in the name of all things sacred, what shall men remember? The essence and significance of our devotions here today are not to be found in the fact that the men whose remains fill these graves were brave in battle. If we met simply to show our sense of bravery, we should find enough on both sides to kindle admiration. In the raging storm of fire and blood, in the fierce torrent of shot and shell, of sword and bayonet, whether on foot or on horse, unflinching courage marked the rebel not less than the soldier, the loyal soldier. But we are not here to applaud manly courage, save it has been displayed in noble cause. We must never forget that victory to the rebellion meant death to the republic. We must never forget that the loyal soldiers who rest beneath this sod flung themselves between the nation and the nation's destroyers. If today we have a country not boiling in agony of blood like France, if now we have a united country no longer cursed by the hell-black system of human bondage, if the American name is no longer byword and a hissing to a mocking earth, if the Star-Spangled Banner floats only over free American citizens in every quarter of the land, and our country has before it a long and glorious career of justice, liberty, and civilization, we are indebted to the unselfish devotion of the noble army who rest in these honored graves all around us. I strongly oppose this legislation. It's unnecessary, doesn't help anybody, and it hurts a lot of people.
Gentlelady from the 51st, Delegate Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Good afternoon, colleagues. Every day, we stand and pray. Every day, we recite the Pledge of Allegiance to represent values and freedoms, as the gentle lady from District 52nd said today. Every day, we stand for our constituents. Every day, we bear the scrutiny of the bills introduced in our votes. Every day, we rise, we give thanks, and we do it all over again. Be patient with me as I express to you what this bill has caused in our mountain state: good, bad, and indifferent. It has caused awareness. It has caused allyship to be a verb. It has caused folks to be part of democracy. It has caused the uncomfortable moments to be part of a movement. It has caused conversations amongst neighbors, family members, and co-workers. According to the recent news story, the chairman of the Committee of Gov.org expressed that certain bills don't make the agenda because there's not enough support for those bills. Well, I wonder if he meant, or that statement meant, the support of the people of West Virginia are the colleagues who sit amongst us. See, I do my best to listen without bias. I wonder, who is this bill protecting? What is it promoting? Because hate is not heritage. How is this moving our state forward? Unknown, but who is this helping and who is this hurting? Well, I can stand before you and I can tell you here in the debate, in the committee, sitting here, the people that I pray with, the people that I love, laugh at bigotry and racism. It hurts deep. It not only hurts me, but it hurts all the West Virginians who are listening at home during their lunch break. The kids that are in school that are choosing homeschooling because they look at this as part of living history. It hurts. When will racism become extinct? The battle is ongoing every day. So let me share with you some simple math, a simple formula. Power plus privilege equals racism. I'm going to say it a little slower, and for those that's in the back. Power plus privilege equals racism. This is a simple formula, but has never had equality or equity for black and brown people. So black people can't be racist. Please tell these folks to get out of my inbox with that, because black people cannot be racist. Why does years of oppression and suppression, loss, treason, murder, and rape be promoted, protected, and pampered in our wild and wonderful West Virginia? Still trying to decipher an answer. So many unanswered questions, especially when Louisiana, my home state, has erected these same statues. Louisiana. The why is not rhetorical. The why is no mystery. I don't understand, if these statues were donated, why don't the organizations or the individuals place them in their front yard, their basements, or in a museum? It's not about my feelings. It's about the hidden figures that represent this state that is good enough for the big screen, but never good enough to be placed in the front yards of the people's house. Booker T. Washington statue sits in the back. And for the first 2 years I served here, it was dirty. And every time I had an opportunity, I sent an email and I said, when will he be clean? When will the green slime be removed? You may not pay attention, but my children pay attention. My godchildren pay attention. The black children and the black adults and those allies pay attention when they come and they visit us, lobbying, celebrating Girls' Day, celebrating the 100th year of the 19th Amendment. Don't take my word for it. I appreciate the chairman attending the public hearing. So let me share with you some sentiments from the West Virginia State President of the NAACP. The Confederate Army and General Stonewall Jackson are not part of West Virginia's military history. They were traitors and white supremacists who fought against the Union and to keep black people enslaved. For those who feel General Jackson was born in West Virginia and it is his birthright, who else has a birthright to have a statue. Let me think about some folks who may have had some roots in West Virginia or just passed through. Will we allow a statue for Harry Powers, the Lonely Hearts Killer, or Charles Manson, as they have ties to West Virginia, and have a memorial on state property? Let us think inclusively about those who have been beaten, tortured, enslaved, raped, stripped of humanity. As generational trauma is real, it is not a decisive concept. All of us sitting here are still standing. Each of us find our own way to be strong. Heavy crowns are painful to wear, especially natural hair crowns. I want you to know I see you. I feel you. I respect you. But also know I believe you when you show me who you are the first time. Can we respect West Virginians' history? The red button will stop the hate. The red button will elevate the voices who opposes this bill. The red button will illustrate that you and our state denounce white supremacy. The red button will acknowledge that slavery was wrong and is wrong. The red button will move our state forward so West Virginians can stay, rebuild, and succeed. But let's talk about the green button. The green button will promote hate in our state. The green button will celebrate the years of oppression of free labor, hangings, beatings, shackles, and chains. The green button will send a clear message to black and brown people that you live in a colorless society, which is dangerous, detrimental, and deadly. A green button will congratulate the losing team. And a green button is the ultimate award of participation also to that losing team. And I had to add one, because a green button is the laughter that I heard from my colleagues around the words of racism, bigotry, or hate. A green button is segregating racism today is not the same as racism yesterday. Even Lucifer was an angel. You have the freedom and the choice not to infringe on many West Virginians, visitors, and potential residents. Please do not be guilty by association. I am not your enemy. I am the people's energy, and they are my strength. Stop the hate in our state, because if you want to get free, you have to first get honest. Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Gentleman from the 3rd, Delegate Fluharty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I have the honor and privilege of representing the city of Wheeling, my colleague from the 3rd. So I'm obligated today to stand up and wonder, what the hell are we doing? See, Wheeling, birthplace of the state, Independence Hall. Slavery was debated in Independence Hall. We decided to become West Virginia and be on the right side of history. And we're here today debating whether we should celebrate and continue to celebrate and protect the Confederacy. What state are we in again? Like, you know, a lot of bad bills go through here. We know this, especially in the last few years. But I don't know if I've ever seen one that you just stop and smack your head and go, what is this? Imagine being from West Virginia, a state legislator, and debating whether we should protect the Confederacy. What? This is why we make the national news all the time. It's unbelievable. The bill says our history. It's not our history. We decided, you know what? We don't want it to be our history. So we created a separate state. But here we are. I mean, And Wheeling, I love Wheeling. It's a friendly city. Quite literally, we follow that. It's basically our golden rule there. Friendly city. And we celebrate winners. We have statues. We don't celebrate losers or traitors. And we certainly don't put the losers on the winner's property. Blows my mind that we're doing that. Let's protecting that. And let's be real. You guys don't care about the Stonewall statue. Come on. You act like you're going around taking selfies with Stonewall. You're not. If we took that thing down at midnight, you wouldn't even notice. Right? You don't care. We know you don't care. But to touch on what the gentleman from 51st said, it's not about me, myself, us. You know, it doesn't hit me like it hits others from the African American community. And that's the highest quality a politician can have, is empathy. Put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Right? The young Hornbuckles of the world, the young Walkers of the world. We don't celebrate people who tried to take them out. We don't celebrate people who didn't think they were a whole person. That's not to be celebrated. That's to be condemned. And we have the opportunity to do that. And we're going to reverse course. I don't understand it, guys. When you sit around and dream up legislation and it's all about helping the base out. Where has your base gone? You were the party of Lincoln. He's out there. Lincoln walks at midnight, right? Might have to change that. It might be Lincoln weeping at midnight. Because you're not the party of Lincoln anymore. You're the party of insurrectionists. I mean, quite literally. They just did that a couple months ago. So, I don't know where we're going as a state right now. It's confusing to me. We don't value our history. We certainly don't support our history. We certainly don't learn from it. So I'll be standing with Wheeling, the friendly city, and our statues that talk about the winners and good people. I'll be voting no on this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 1st, Delegate Zateslow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. You know, as somebody whose great-grandfather came here in 1896 and who's read the history of the United States and lived a good part of it now, I listened to this debate, and I'm sorry, but I reject most of it, because this country is truly, truly a remarkable place. And the reason that I say that is because of all the discussion we've had here today. The Civil War was a terrible time. Rivers of blood were spilled. Rivers of blood of people of various races were spilled. There were plenty of black soldiers in the Union Army who were slaughtered during this war. I can't imagine, for the life of me, because coming from Europe, these kinds of things don't happen when one enemy vanquishes another. What happened when the Civil War ended? Well, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were passed. There was nothing the people in the South who had enjoyed slavery, enjoyed the fruits of slavery, could do about it. But what did they do? They came back together and formed the country again. They formed the country, they came back, they were vanquished, and for that, what did they do? They did one thing. I disagree that the statues that you see are to lord it over anybody. I think what it is when you're that sad, you put something up to honor the people who spilled all the blood that were your friends and neighbors back along the years before. Perhaps they shouldn't be there shouldn't be statues up there. I can understand that to a degree. But for God's sake, the country came back together. That's almost unheard of in human history. We need to do that again. We need to have the conversation about what fits and what doesn't. There's no question that you can do that. I, for one, will tell you this, and it really angers me. To take Abraham Lincoln's name off a school in San Francisco tells me a lot about what's going on in the country. Do we want that? Do we want the statue of Abraham Lincoln taken out because somebody doesn't like it? I don't think so. Is that what this bill to block white supremacists from having their statue removed? No, I think what it is to have a thoughtful conversation about what we can take down and what we won't take down. We can have that conversation knowing what the historic context is for it all. This bill aids that process, and it does so that you're not having people just show up and decide for you what we will do. We should decide that all together, and we should have that conversation. I think a conversation is warranted all the time. It will always be warranted in this country. That's why this country is this country. The conversation is what counts. The conversation leads to innovation, and now in our country, 90% of the people in this country make at or above the average wage of the world. That doesn't happen by chance. That happens because of the process we have in place. I think this bill furthers the conversation and gets us to a place where we can start to make decisions. If people want to do things with statues, I think that's fine. Let's have the conversation, let's pass the bill, and let's get on with it. And I welcome the discussion sincerely. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 43rd, Delegate Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I honestly didn't know if I was even going to speak on this today, but reading the bill again and having this debate that we've had, I had to speak on it. This is my second, session, and I remember how excited I was to come to Charleston. And I was ready to get to work for my district and my constituents, and I was really like, we're going to do some great things. I'm going to work across the aisle. We're going to do some great things, both Democrats and Republicans. Then I started learning about this theme we apparently have down here, where we say we like local control, but we do everything in our power to take away local control. I didn't run for mayor. I didn't run for city council. I didn't run for county commission. I ran for the House of Delegates. But apparently here in the House of Delegates, we're going to take basically that authority away from those entities to make those decisions that if they want to remove a statue and the people of that town or city or county or they want to remove it, we're going to take that away from them. We're going to say, no, you got to keep it. I can't imagine what it's like for my colleagues and all people of color of West Virginia to walk around and see these statues at the People's House on public property, enshrining people who supported the Confederacy for them to be owned, murdered, beaten. I can't imagine. The only way I can really think about it is, I guess, what it would be like for me to walk around and see statues of John Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer. Can you imagine? Let's just say, can you imagine in Germany, the legislative body voting to protect Nazi statues? Hell no. Why? Because it's insane. But I guess here in West Virginia, we're going to make sure we protect the statues of a bunch of losers, so With that being said, I'm not going to vote for this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 35th, Delegate Scaff.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, there's no way my words can equal my colleague from the 51st and my colleague from the 16th who's getting ready to speak. But I just wanted to touch on what is going on here today. Why are we dealing with this now? This is my second time speaking during this session, and we got a lot of work to do. We got this pandemic going on. We're helping our small businesses get back on their feet, families back together, a little bit of normalcy, restructuring our tax system with my colleague from the 64th. This does nothing for that. What does this bill say about our priorities? They're kind of mixed up. We're creating a bill, like my colleague from the 51st, Delegate Williams, said, that does nothing to attract people to West Virginia. It does nothing to help people succeed, and it really doesn't do anything to convince people to stay here. But you know what it does? It does a lot to hurt our image and the perception of what people have about West Virginia. Just solidifies that. Think about it. Think about the headlines that this bill has caused. The intent is great, and yeah, let's preserve and let's respect our history and our monuments. But unfortunately, that's not the headlines. That's not the headlines that we're seeing on TV, and yes, in those newspapers. It's all about this rebel statue. And that's the reason for the conversation today. Yeah, it was to create a process to maybe help go about preserving and protect our history, but that's not what's happening here. The bottom line is, and we all know it, that every picture I've seen, every news station has reported this rebel statue, hence the conversation. So who does that hurt? That hurts every one of us that's down here trying to create legislation to attract and retain and bring people to West Virginia, to change the narrative, not reconfirm all that thinking that people. My friend called me yesterday from New York City and said, "Are you kidding me? Do you really have a Stonewall Jackson monument still on your ground?" He saw it in the USA Today. I said, "Yeah, unfortunately, we're one of the last states, you know." He goes, "Well, hell, you guys weren't even with the South, were you?" No, there was this group of Western Virginian people who decided we didn't want to be with the South. We didn't want to stand up for slavery. We wanted to be our own state. They fought so hard to get away from that, but he was just, don't want to get off on a tangent, but he was just joking with me the fact that we still have that statue on this ground. Someone in New York City noticed that. History. We heard a lot about history today. My colleague from the 3rd said, what side of history do we want to be remembered for? You know, I hope this conversation today lets you all think when you go home and tell your kids and your grandkids about what side of history we are. You know the one thing that we could do from this? The one thing that could attract and retain people and say, you know why I'm proud to be a West Virginian? Because we weren't with the South. We broke away. We didn't stand for that. We didn't stand for slavery. We didn't stand for hate. We were on the right side of history to the tune of we didn't care what the color of your skin was. We wanted to break away. We wanted to break away and stand up and be our own people and not stand for that. So the only thing I wanted to say is this conversation came up, the Stonewall Jackson statue. We can talk about, we can focus on the part of history that made us who we are. But let's not forget what we heard here today. It may not be hurtful to a lot of you in here. It may not be hurtful to some West Virginians, but there is a lot of people that it does hurt, that does give disrespect to. And we're here to represent everybody. We're here to represent all West Virginians. So, Mr. Speaker, you know, I realize what we're trying to do here today, but instead of telling the world that we are still living in the past, let's look to the future. Let's lift up our West Virginia values, what we all came down to hear. Show that empathy. Let's work together. Let's move West Virginia forward. And since, unfortunately, this statue is still on our ground, and unfortunately it has sidebarred the conversation of this bill, Think about this for 1 second as I close. Just think about this. If Mr. Stonewall Jackson was alive today, or was alive and just passed away last week, let's say, and he was advocating for those same principles over the last 75 years, would we hold him as a hero today? Would we host his statue on the most prominent spot of our Capitol grounds that we could possibly give someone? I think not. I think not. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 16th, Delegate Hornbuckle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Ladies and gentlemen, as I've noted before, my grandfather was a coal miner and a preacher from Alabama and chose to move up to West Virginia to relocate and build a family in Logan. And today I'm going to try my best to share with you heart and soul that only a coal miner can from our beloved state. And I'm going to try to feed you a little food through word that only a preacher could. Now, I also want to make sure that it's duly noted that I rise today not in anger, but I rise in confusion, frustration, and disappointment. As we've heard from several of our members today, why this? Why now? All of us in this body, we've seen a little bit, we've seen a lot of bit, especially over the past couple years. And hopefully, as Americans, we're on the mend. And hopefully, as West Virginians, we're all trying to collectively push our state forward. So again, why this? Why now? Why is this a priority? Now, all of us witnessed back in the summer, I think, our country at a boiling point. At a boiling point. And there was a lot of tragedies, unnecessary, that have always occurred, but were on film. And so as we try to get through that and ease the pain, we're all being reflective and having conversations. And I remember a couple instances vividly in my office this summer. One was with a client of mine, a Republican from Parkersburg. Another was with a client of mine, a Republican from Guyandotte, West Virginia. And the conversation with the gentleman from Parkersburg, he said, you know, Sean, you know, what's happening right now in our country is awful. It's disgusting. I don't stand for any of that. But the only thing, Sean, you know, is, you know, I just don't agree, you know, with the looting and the rioting and things like that. And I said, well, you know what? I don't really either. But you also have to understand the history and what that comes from. You know, they also say the riot is the language of the unheard. And I'm not agreeing with looting or anything like that. But people are crying out for help, and they have nowhere to go. And then the conversation went on, and we started going back and forth. And he said, I hear you, and I need to think about that. And, you know, I don't agree with some of these, you know, groups that are formed and things like that. And, you know, he started reaching back in history. He started talking about the Black Panthers. And I chuckled a little bit. And I said, Mr. Such and Such, and we're good friends. I said, well, our history doesn't tell you everything about those people. We like to paint them as certain things for a narrative. So they were simply erected to protect their communities from pillage and violence from the oppressors. And also, our history books doesn't tell you, sir, that there was white Panthers that stood in arms with those people of color to protect those communities and speak out against violence and hatred. And literally his mind was blown. He was like, he couldn't put it together. He said, what, there was white Panthers? Yeah, we don't tell you that in history. because we want to keep people divided. So we don't tell you that there's a group of people fighting together for righteous, just causes. We're going to spin it a different way. The other gentleman from Guyandot, we started talking about some things, and he said, Sean, what happened to that young gentleman in Minneapolis was crazy. He said, I'm going to tell you right now, if I was there, I'd have drop-kicked that officer. What was he thinking? How could he choke somebody out like that? I'd have drop-kicked that officer. And I said, I appreciate that, but life is about perspective. While you might do that, you have the privilege to do that. I would never do that because that outcome might not be the same. And he sat there and he chewed on it and he said, Sean, I never thought about it like that. I said, that's okay. Because again, life is about perspective. That's why we're having this conversation. It's talking and it's listening to be heard. This summer also took the initiative to start a group called Finding Common Ground. Imagine that. Finding common ground with literally people from all over the area experiencing different things in different walks of life. Because I feel that's important to get where we're headed, where we need to head in this country, in this beautiful state of West Virginia. I'm also a believer that not everybody is against what I think a lot of people think. They just don't have an experience. And sometimes they might feel if they let their true selves go that maybe they might get attacked for things. So I wanted to strive to create a safe place to no matter what you think, that you can bring those ideals and those thoughts and we can have civil debate. And they appreciated that. And that actually evolved into a TV series, if you will, called Front Porch Talks. Try to help us, help heal us. But I want to get back to these emotions that I'm feeling today. Confusion, frustration, disappointment. And first of all, to the gentleman from the first, I would have to respectfully disagree. This bill before us today is going to cut off discussion. It's going to cut off discussion about these monuments and these statues because it's going to take away local control. Because we're going to say, us in Charleston, we're above the people in Parkersburg, Huntington, Morgantown, Berkeley, Beckley. We're going to decide that. Over the past year at Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia, our board, Marshall University's board, I don't know if the other two gentlemen were aware of that from my district, they displayed local control. They had different stakeholders at the table to talk about this important issue. It was a great display of democracy. I also want to touch on something that the gentleman from the 43rd and my big brother from the 3rd talked about, losing. Hold on, time out. We just had, and he was my president, all right, the gentleman, Donald Trump, so much winning. So much winning. We're all enamored with winning. And here we are, we're wanting to honor losers. This is mind-blowing. They lost against all of us, because we're West Virginians. Don't ever forget that. We were on the prevailing side of this war. We're going to honor losers. And to delve into that a little bit more, if we're talking about the South, I love the South, but I love Southern West Virginia. I love my guys from Tug Valley, Mingo Central, Logan, Chapmanville. I guarantee you, if one of my buddies that in this body used to ball for Tug Valley and they beat up on Mingo Central, I guarantee you they would probably not wear a Mingo Central Letterman jacket. From my guys from Chapmanville and Logan. Now, Chapmanville, besides a couple of years ago, they never got to beat Logan. But my boys from Logan, they used to beat up on Chapmanville. They would never, ever honor Chapmanville on their school grounds. It just wouldn't happen. And if you tell me that, you're lying through your teeth. let's talk about winning and losing. So we're going to celebrate that. Now I want to move on to frustration. I'm a little bit frustrated because we've had the gentleman from the 67th and also from the 17th, possibly, maybe besides the speaker, probably the smartest guy in this body. He just laid out history to you all from his father, who used to be a history teacher. And if you didn't catch that, I want to just go back on that. There are 1,741 public symbols of Confederacy in our country. 771 states, statues and monuments to be exact. Now, I want to show you something today. This is a map. This is a map right here. Now you see a few out on the West Coast.
The gentleman may state his point.
There are no visual displays to be used on the floor.
The gentleman is correct. There is a rule, so if the gentleman would... House be at ease. House will be in order. To the gentleman, the chair was in error. That is not a rule. That is a rule for the gallery, not the House. The gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. But I'll move on from this one. But if you can see here, they're mostly speckled throughout the South. Now, there's a couple on the fringe of West Virginia, but again, we used to be conjoined with Virginia. All right? So there's that. We're going to just go through a little history lesson here. Again, to the gentleman from the 17th. We're going to look at the spike. Again, respectfully disagreeing with the gentleman from the first. There is a reason when a lot of these statues were erected. Okay? So we're going to start through Jim Crow, which is about segregation. And then we're going to go through lynchings, the lost cause, which the other gentleman spoke about. That is the spike. And then finally on this display here, where you can see it a little bit more in detail. In 1866, a year after the war between the states, was the formation of the Ku Klux Klan. That is not a coincidence. It's not. It just isn't. We travel through history. When we see the biggest spike in between 1900 and 1920, the NAACP was founded. That was the biggest spike of all. The Tulsa race riots, the Red Summer race riots. And I could go on and on and on forever. But understand it is no coincidence in our country when these were erected and put up. They were a symbol to keep people in their place. There was also a statement earlier today, gentlemen talking about people joining the military fighting together. Well, I also remember in the World War when they fought together, it was two different outcomes for those soldiers, our veterans that came home. At GI Bill, yeah, there were a lot of soldiers in that war that GI Bill didn't speak to. To my resident bankers in the room, there was a thing called redlining. and the black ones weren't able to go to the great gated communities and the communities and all those things that everybody else was in. They weren't able to get a college education. So I want to make sure it's duly noted that even though they fought together, it's always been separate. And disappointed. And I'm gonna close here soon. I'm disappointed because all of you all are my colleagues. And I've got a lot of friends in here. It's the message that we're sending with this. It's the message that we're sending that we're going to keep these statues and monuments no matter what. We're not going to leave it up to locals, municipalities, to be able to just debate about it, have them figure it out for their own. We want to make a statement from Charleston that we're going to keep these oppressive monument statues up. In full disclosure, I am one to, I don't believe they should ever be destroyed or defaced. I'm gonna tell you right now, if it was up to me, I don't care if the Union, Confederate, if we're gonna do that to American history, that's wrong. And that should never happen. And I would submit to you, if it was a bill addressing that, heck, I might even sponsor it. But to be out in public over people when we understand what the meaning was is just wrong. And I'm not even saying they have to be taken down. I know some in this building would like for them to be taken down. Personally, and I can only speak personally on this one, this summer when there were some of those things being taken down, what I felt inside was that it's just a token measure so we don't have to address the real problems. That's just how I felt. But again, that should be up for a debate for someone else and not us. I want to leave you with one last story. My freshman year down here, 2015, I was hanging out with a motley crew. I was with Bill Cole. I was with the Senate President. I think Mitch Carmichael was there. And we were having a good time after the session, just hanging out, getting to know one another. Appreciate them for taking me in. And as many of you all that really do know me, I just like to mess with people a little bit. And we were getting off the elevator. I believe we were at 4 Points, the hotel. And said, Mr. President, I was talking to Mr. Cole. Said, you know, we're running some awful bad legislation here. And what we got going on? And he, well, whatever, Sean, like that. And then I said, well, you know, our biggest problem is people leaving the state. And he said, yeah, it is. And I said, you know, I think, especially as young people, we could probably capture some of those people from leaving and probably entice some others to come. He said, yeah. And then I said, well, I'm gonna tell you what if I could guarantee you over the next 10 years that I can increase our population by 50,000? He looks at me, and I said, but the catch is, there are gonna be 50,000 black people. And he looks at me and goes, Sean, I don't care if they're red, black, white, purple, you can bring them here, let's do it. And I appreciate the Senate President for that. And this piece of legislation flies in the face of that great conversation that we had, because it's just a message. So what I want you all to do tonight, since we're about discussion and talking to people, 9:50 p.m. tonight, we got our Mounties playing Moorhead State. On Fridays, a lot of times we tear out of here to drive up to Morgantown and go watch them play, and I know there's some donors in here. I think a lot of those people that we're clapping for and cheering for, they probably wouldn't like this. They might not come back. We might not be able to field that great team that we love up north. So I just want you to think today the message that you're sending. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 36th, Delegate Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Several things about the bill. It's a problem with local control. We really have a number of bills to eliminate the city animal tax, the city user fee, the city amusement tax. We're going to now take away from the localities any decisions about monuments and statues. Now, what I think is important is we're not really talking about history. We're talking about glorification of our values, of who we are as a people. I have a lot of trouble on this issue when I think about having my children, who are white, with friends who are African American, and when they're little, say 7, 8, 9 years old, and I drive up to the Capitol and show them this beautiful building, and one of the children says, "What's that?" And I say, "Well, that's a statue of Stonewall Jackson." Who was he? Well, he was a general. Which war? He was in the Civil War. He was a general in the Civil War. And then one of them says, was he for slavery or against slavery? And I would say, well, he was for slavery. I can't imagine being in the moment that every African American parent has to go through to explain to their children why this is a great country and how this great country could treat them and their ancestors. I cannot imagine being able to say an answer to this question. So he would want me to be a slave, the African American child says. How do I answer that? And then I hope one of my children would say, why is that there? And I would not be able to answer. I can't explain why it's there. It was put up to glorify the South and the Confederates. I understand why it got up. I don't understand how it stays up. It is a problem. It's a glorification of values that we don't support now. It's a glorification of values that we cannot present to our children because they aren't who we are. So it's all about the children. That's what statues are about. It's not about history. It's about the kids figuring out who we are, why we are a great nation, what values we have as a great nation to liberty and equality. And those values are not presented in all of the monuments and statutes that this bill will protect. I'll point out also, as a problem in the bill, there's no requirement about how things would be put up. And if there's something that's just there, or if somebody decides they want to put up some sort of a monument, it's going to have to go through this procedure to take it down. There is no requirement in this bill that any of these monuments, plaques, place names, or anything require any kind of official action by local governments. They can just pop up. And you say, what about graffiti? Well, I don't know. You'd have to fairly say to someone, it's a $500 fine and 6 months in jail if you take down something that is historic. That's in the bill. So there are problems with the bill, but it's all about the children and our values as a people. And how do you answer the question, why is it still there? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 19th, Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know this has been long, but I want to add two things. One is, I'm from Sarita Canova. Those of you who know where Sarita Canova is, we're the westernmost point in the state of West Virginia. But one of the points of pride I have about Cerrito is it's the only town in the entire nation that was founded on the principle of being against slavery. Abolitionists from New England came, and they settled in that area, and they were working an experiment to try to rid Virginia of slavery. The second thing I'm very proud of is West Virginia is the only state that was formed for the purpose of preserving the Union and eliminating slavery. And yet, to this day, of all the monuments that have been relocated, West Virginia is the only state in the Union that has not removed or relocated a Confederate monument. I think we need to examine why. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 47th, Delegate Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I'd like to congratulate my friends on the other side of the chamber here for the success they've had in framing this, both in the media and in debate in this chamber today. And whether you believe me or not, the reason I picked up this bill and sponsored it wasn't from malice in my heart. It's because I've witnessed what we've had happening in this country recently and the cancel culture that's literally eliminating history before our eyes. And we've made this debate in the media and in this chamber all about a statue on the corner out here, but that's not the entirety of this bill. It's truly encompassing historical monuments. And Barber County is in the heart of my district, and on June 3rd, 1861, the very first land battle of the Civil War occurred there, sometimes deridingly referred to as the Philippi Races, but that's widely regarded as the first land battle, and that's our history. It's the middle of Barber County, which was named for Philip Pendleton Barber, who is the only individual in United States history who served as Speaker of the House of Representatives and on the Supreme Court. So I like to think we know a little bit about history in Barber County, and we're pretty concerned about preserving it. And amendments to this bill today and here would have allowed removing Barber's name from our county and several other counties in West Virginia that are named for people that have some dark history. But I think we really need to step back, take a breath, take a wide look at this, and concern ourselves with what the future is going to look like if we continue down this path and eliminate history, sometimes unthinkingly, in my opinion. And I don't want to take up any more of anyone's time here, but I do have a short quote. "He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past. The masses never revolt of their own accord, and they never revolt merely because they are oppressed. Indeed, so long as they are not permitted to have standards of comparison, they never even become aware that they are oppressed. The past was erased, the erasure was forgotten, and the lie became the truth." It's from 1984 by Orwell, and I really fear that we are on a path toward erasing the past unthinkingly. And I would ask you all to support this bill and vote green. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 10th, Delegate Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman yield?
Gentleman yields.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm kind of confused a little bit on this bill. When I first came in the chamber, I thought this bill was about all of our historic monuments, not just two. And we've listened to almost 2 hours of testimony, and we've only had 2 monuments really discussed. Is that the extent of the bill?
No, it protects 6 different sections of historical artifacts or monuments. That would include any type of military history, the labor movement, the civil rights movement, Native American history, things memorializing natural disasters and industrial accidents and things like that, as well as now with the amendment today, religious artifacts on public property.
How about modern day history?
It would protect modern history as well. We had an amendment today that removed a date that was really unnecessary, but this bill would protect monuments that were made after the bill would be enacted as well.
The 2 monuments that we've heard about basically have both been Stonewall Jackson, Confederate general. What about a grand night for the Ku Klux Klan? Would that be legitimate to bring into this bill as well?
Well, just simply being a grand night of the Ku Klux Klan wouldn't protect a monument. That individual would have to fall in one of the 6 other categories, be it religious, Native American, be a veteran of some war, or be associated with a natural disaster or something of that nature.
Let's keep in mind there's a more than life-size monument of a former Grand Night of the Ku Klux Klan downstairs in the rotunda. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are there those seeking further recognition? If not, I recognize the gentleman for the 29th to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've had a lively and spirited debate today, and it was certainly wonderful to hear from everyone about their thoughts about the Civil War. This bill doesn't have much to do with the Civil War. This bill has to do with creating a process. What this bill does is what was not achieved over the previous 100 years. I find it interesting that the minority has sat here for the last 2 hours lecturing us on a monument that sat there for the 84 years prior to Republicans even being in control. And they did not manage to remove it. But what this bill does today is actually puts into play the ability to remove something that is offensive to everyone, that we could unanimously decide there. It gives a process for it. It gives an application for it. It gives municipalities a role in it. It gives people a role in it. It gives the state curator a role in it. It's not decided by the people in this body. It's decided by the historians that we've appointed to protect the history and promote the history of our state. This is not a racist bill. Hitting green on this bill is not a racist move. The sponsors are not satanic. This bill sets up a process that we have the courage to have the debate, that we have the courage to talk to one another about things that aren't exactly comfortable, like slavery, like oppression. Whether that be African Americans, whether it be Native Americans, whether it be Irish Americans, we have the courage to talk about it in this house. We don't shy away from the topic, and we have certainly not shied away from the topic today. What this legislation represents is us looking at the events of the last 250 years and saying we are willing to have an honest debate. We are willing to meet you halfway and talk to you about the differences and come up with a solution that doesn't involve people looting in the streets, that doesn't involve mobs tearing down statues, but we have a way as a government and as a people to address one another with civility, to remove something that is offensive. And I will not sit here today and be called a racist for confronting a problem head on and measured with unbiased. A yes vote today is a vote for courage. It is a vote that you have the courage to have a tough conversation, that you have the courage to have a tough conversation with the folks at home. A red vote is a coward vote, that you're afraid to have the debate. A debate that couldn't have been had for 100 years. Well, that's why the bill's here today. We're ready to address it. The folks that are going to vote green are addressing the problem. We're not going to hide from it. We're not going to stand in the back and just pretend like nothing's going on. We're going to meet it head on. We're setting up a process, and that's what this is about. For those of you who are courageous today, I'd encourage you to vote green. This is a great bill. This is good for our state, and it's good for the people to have a process by which that old wounds can be healed, scars can be closed, and we can communicate with one another. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine.
The following have paired in accordance with House Rule 43. Delegate Burkhammer, yea. Delegate Lovejoy, nay.
Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 70 ayes, 27 nays, 3 members absent. Clerk will close the machine. Has every member voted? Close the machine. On that question, there were 70 ayes, 28 nays, and 2 members absent not voting. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2174, West Virginia Monument and Memorial Protection Act of 2021.
Are there amendments to the title?
Delegate Steele moves to amend the title.
Question before the House is the title amendment. Those in favor of the title amendment will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. The title amendment is adopted. The title of the House will be title as amended. The title of the bill will be as amended by the House. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2496 relating to assessment of real property.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman from 32nd to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill will generate riveting debate. The purpose of this bill is to reform the property tax appellate process, which involves disputes between taxpayers, county assessors, county commissions, and the tax commissioner. Most significantly, the bill empowers the Office of Tax Appeals to hear appeals so disputes are resolved by an impartial tribunal without a budgetary stake in the outcome. The bill also lowers the standard of proof a taxpayer must meet to a preponderance of the evidence from clear and convincing evidence. Finally, the bill makes an appeal to the Board of Equalization and Review optional at the taxpayer's discretion and eliminates the Board of Assessment appeals entirely. Specifically, the process begins with the taxpayer petitioning an assessor. If a petition is rejected by the assessor or the assessor fails to respond in time, the taxpayer may either appeal to the County Board of Equalization and Review or alternatively to the Office of Tax Appeals. Again, the taxpayer's burden of proof is identified as no greater than a simple preponderance of the evidence at all levels of the review and appeal. This bill extends the jurisdiction of the Office of Tax Appeals to hear these appeals from aggrieved parties concerning the valuation, classification, and taxability of real and personal property. As with the current law, the taxpayer must pay tax due for the tax year during the review and appeal. Any subsequent reduction in taxes will either be credited to future tax payments or refunded, depending upon the circumstances and the will of the county commission. Finally, the statute directs that a taxpayer must provide substantial information in a petition to correct what they believe to be an inaccurate property evaluation. This bill provides that owners of residential property, when used as their primary residence, need not furnish a formal appraisal of the property. That is a summary of the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 96 ayes, 1 nay, and 3 members absent or not voting. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2496 relating to assessments of real property.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute House Bill 2499. Tax reduction for arms and ammo manufacturing.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman is 64th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill concerns taxation for the manufacturing, sale, and use of firearms and ammunition. The purpose of the bill is to attract manufacturing companies to the state. The bill has 4 parts. The first part of the bill will implement property tax relief for these types of manufacturers. The second portion of the bill amends the formula for calculating the manufacturing investment tax credit. The third part of the bill creates a new tax credit for federal excise tax imposed on small arms and ammunition. And the last part of the bill exempts sales of small arms and small arms ammunition from state sales and use taxes. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 93 ayes, 4 nays, and 3 members absent or not voting. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2499, tax reduction for arms and ammo manufacturing.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2633, creating a 2021 Farm Bill.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having read? If not, the gentleman on the 15th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of House Bill 2633 is to create the Farm Bill with all powers from the Department of Agriculture. The major features of this bill include a comprehensive rewrite of commercial feed law to shift from a per product registration to per manufacturer registrations, and update definitions of adulterated and misbranding. Significant changes to regulation of farmers markets to clearly clarify the role of local health departments with respect to requiring food establishment permits versus one permit of a department valid in all 55 counties. Changes the Livestock Care Standards Board to better align with the goals of the Department of Agriculture and to better allow them to work together to prevent and investigate the inhumane treatment of animals. The bill also makes other technical cleanup and clarifications to the Department of Agriculture's roles and functions without removing any duties or requirements. That is the bill, Mr. Speaker. I would urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? The gentleman to 36, Doggett Road.
Just a question of the delegate. Does it? I see that at least on the abstract, it says that for raw milk that it may be used for non-human consumption. It doesn't make any changes in the raw milk rules for human consumption, does it?
No, it's just the non-human consumption.
All right, thank you, sir.
Is there further debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 97 ayes, 0 nays, and 3 members absent or not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute House Bill 2633, creating a 2021 Farm Bill.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2742, providing explicit authority to process an online driver's license or identification renewal or reissuance when the applicant needs to update the address.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having read? If not, the gentleman from the 15th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of House Bill 2742 is to provide the Division of Motor Vehicles explicit authority to process an online driver's license or identification renewal or reassurance when the applicant needs to update the address. That is the bill, Mr. Speaker. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 97 ayes, 0 nays, and 3 members absent or not voting. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2742, providing explicit authority to process an online driver's license or identification renewal or reissuance when the applicant needs to update the address.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2777, repeal municipal amusement tax.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having read? If not, the gentleman from the 16th, Doggett Linville, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2777 does exactly as the title would suggest and repeals the ability for municipalities to charge an amusement tax not to exceed 2% of the price of admission. Notably, this was enacted in 1937 and said that even if 2% was less than 1 penny, they could charge 1 penny. Mr. Speaker, I'm available for any questions and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 88 ayes, 9 nays, and 3 members absent or not voting. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2777, repeal municipal amusement tax.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2782, repeal domestic animal tax.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman the 16th will explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2782 does a little more than the title would suggest, in that the bill would repeal the provisions of the West Virginia Code relating to the municipal domestic animal tax and licensure process. That's correct. As it sits right now, we would allow them to license whether or not you can have a goldfish. Mr. Speaker, this would repeal that. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman at 36, Doggett Rowe.
If the gentleman would answer a question.
Certainly.
The tax we're repealing are funds that go to the, that allow for payment of services to animals and for animals and that sort of work, correct?
As the gentleman will recall, the Municipal League actually testified and said that they were unaware of any city in the state that was actually doing this. And so the funds that would potentially be pulled out apparently do not exist, and we're going to make sure that they don't license whether or not you could have a ferret or a goldfish, a pheasant.
I thought there was a fiscal note and that it had something like $73,000 in collections, and expenses were something like $400,000 for animals.
I have in front of me the fiscal note here. There was a concern there because originally the Municipal League, by my understanding, included the dog tax that is paid to your county assessor. In municipalities, it's generally a $3 tax plus an additional $3 if you live within the municipality. Notably, that's not a license, it's just a tax.
And there's absolute certainty that we're not going to be repealing the municipal dog tax that comes through the county?
Pursuant to both sworn testimony from the Municipal League and from council, that is what I understand.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr.
The gentleman on the 10th, Doggett Kelly, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman yield? Does this include municipal dog tax?
So there is a, as just explained, there's a $3 tax that is paid to your county assessor. This would not impact that. This is a licensure process that would not be collected by your county assessor, and there's some pass-through on the one that's collected by your county assessor. Again, $3 to the assessor, $3 to the municipality if you're in a municipality. This would not impact that tax. This would only impact the ability to both license and tax any manner of domesticated animal, including a goldfish, a pheasant, or a ferret.
Thank you. I was concerned. I have a dog.
The gentleman on the 43rd, Doggett Thompson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman yield?
I would.
Thank you. So, if I'm reading this as is, repeal of a section regarding domestic animal tax, and it would repeal 8-13-10 of the Code of West Virginia. When I pull that up, that code, every municipality shall have the plenary power and authority to levy and collect an annual license tax upon the privilege of keeping a domestic animal within the corporate limits of the municipality. The way that reads, if we were striking that entire section, they're not going to be able to tax and impose an additional tax, like on a dog or a cat.
Again, first, yes, on an additional tax on a dog or a cat. There's a separate tax levied by your county assessor. That's generally the dog tax. If you declare that you own a dog, I believe it's normally $3 to the county assessor. And if you live within the city limits of a city, and they've passed an ordinance that would require it, you get an additional $3. Under this section of code, which is separate from that, this is both a license and a tax. And so this would allow them to license whether or not you can own a flying squirrel. It's freedom for flying squirrels.
Love the squirrels, but my concern, though, is if we're actually striking out this entire section that spells out that, you know, the annual license tax for the privilege of keeping, I'm concerned that that would have an impact because in my city, those funds go to the Humane Society. It's a collaborative effort between county and city funds and additional, to fundraising. So my concern is this is going to potentially harm our humane societies.
So I would respond two ways to that. First, I would mention that the Municipal League testified before the Committee on Finance under oath, stating that they were unaware of any city which has in fact licensed and taxed under this code section the ownership of any domesticated animal, number one. So it should have no fiscal impact as it sits now, though it would prevent them from doing so in the future. The second thing that I would say is that pursuant to the most recent federal action, let's say that it would generate $20,000 a year for a particular city. One city in my district is the city of Huntington. They're about to receive $44 million, or I believe 2,000 years of that amount of money that would go to their humane society. And the city of Huntington's only been a city for 150 years, so we'd go all the way back to basically before Christ before they would be in the negative.
So you're saying that we're going to supplement, we're going to cut taxes to, we're going to eliminate possible tax in order to supplement from federal funding?
Actually, again, there's no revenue, according to sworn testimony from the Municipal League, according to this tax. And in addition, it's a license.
That may be what they testify, but I can guarantee you, like in the city of Elkins, there's significant revenue with cats and dog taxes, and I'm concerned that this is going to eliminate that. But thank you, I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
The gentleman from the 15th, Douglas Foster, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would speak in favor of this bill being the lead sponsor of the bill. It's very simple. If you don't want taxes on your animals, I mean, I don't really like the taxes on the county level either, but this bill actually has nothing to do, as the gentleman stated, with your county taxes on animals as well. But this section is separate from that, adding the city tax as well. So you've got currently the tax that everybody's talking about here is in the other section of code, but this is specifically to a city adding a tax on top of a tax. I know that happens a lot in here, but if you really want to vote against your pet owners in this state and say, hey, we want to tax you more in the cities, then go ahead and vote against this bill. But I would urge adoption and just go ahead. We already got rid of the fun tax. Now let's get rid of the dog tax. Thank you.
Lady in the 35th, Doug Young, is recognized.
Thank you. Will you yield? Sorry, I can't remember your district. I'm just looking at
16th.
16th. Thank you. I hear that. Okay, so we're getting rid of the tax. Can the city still charge a license fee?
No, we would completely eliminate their ability to license whether or not you can own an animal, a domesticated animal, or how many of them that you could own. So they're not going to be able to state whether or not you could own 1 cat or 5. They're not going to be able to state whether you could have 1 dog or 5, and they would not be able to come into your home and check to see if you've got a license for that goldfish.
I thought we were just getting rid of the tax, not all the rules.
So it strikes that entire code section, and that entire code section specifically mentions that they can both license and tax.
I don't see anything about, to levy and collect an annual license tax upon the privilege of keeping an animal. But what about fees? Fees are gone too? Because a fee is not a tax.
That's debatable.
Okay. Does this have anything to do with people like banning breeds, or that's probably not the appropriate question, but would this affect that at all if there were municipalities that ban certain breeds or counties that ban certain breeds?
If they sought to do so through licensure, then it would remove their ability to do that, and I like pit bulls too.
I got one. I like her too. Okay, thank you so much.
The gentleman from the 16th, Doug Hornbuckle, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from the 16th yield?
Certainly.
Thank you. Would this have a fiscal impact on local on local animal shelters?
According to testimony from the Municipal League, no. I know that also during the Finance Committee, you stated that someone from Huntington said $20,000. I've not been able to figure that out. But again, as I mentioned earlier to the other questioner, if it does have an impact of $20,000, the good city of Huntington's getting $44 million wired over to them, which would pay for that for 2,200 years.
But that wouldn't be to the shelter.
Well, it would be up to the mayor and the city council if they'd like to hand that to the shelter, but they've got enough to handle from before Christ to now, and the city's only been a city for 150 years.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Is there further debate on the bill? The gentleman from the 3rd, Doug Fluharty, is recognized.
I'm not seeing it. This is just repealing 81310, right?
That's correct.
Have you read it?
I sure have.
The words you said it talks about licensures and everything. Where at?
It sure does in 81310.
I'm pulling it up right now.
That they have plenary power to license and tax. Does it not say that?
Collect and license tax. Yeah, but I don't. Well, maybe we'll read it differently. But it says to levy and collect an annual license tax, but doesn't say anything about the actual licenses. It's just the tax portion.
Do you know of any license you don't pay a tax on?
I get that, man. I get that. I'm saying this refers to the fee, the tax on it. I get that, but you're saying the licenses themselves, that it directly impacts those. I don't see how it does. Only the tax related to the license.
There's no other explicit authority for them to be able to license that in state code.
All right. Thank you, man.
You bet.
The gentleman from the 45th, Doug Martin, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the previous question.
The previous question has been demanded on the bill. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question before the House is, shall the previous question be ordered on the bill? Those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, the ayes are 50. There are 58 ayes, 39 nays, and 3 members absent or not voting. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the motion adopted. The previous question is ordered. Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from the 16th is recognized to close debate on the bill.
Mr. Speaker, I don't feel that it's right for us to charge people a tax and license whether or not they can own a goldfish, a ferret, a greyhound, a pit bull, or anything else, a flying squirrel, a gerbil, a hamster, you name it. And not only that, but I don't think that the government should come into your home to figure out how many goldfish you're licensed to have and whether or not you're out of your ability to have licensed that. Mr. Speaker, that is a summary of the bill, and I do urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 76 ayes, 21 nays, and 3 members absent or not voting. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2782, repeal domestic animal tax.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on 3rd reading.
House Bill 2808, remove salt from list and definition of mineral for severance tax purposes.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman from the 54th, Doug Hott, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill exempts salt produced for human consumption from severance taxation. There is no fiscal impact. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 94 ayes, 2 nays, and 4 members absent or not voting. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2808, remove salt from list and definition of mineral for severance tax purposes.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2823, exempting buildings or structures utilized exclusively for agricultural purposes from the provisions of the State Building Code.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman on the 15th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill exempts buildings or structures used primarily for agricultural purposes, provisions of the State Building Code, State Fire Code, and any other local codes relating to the building property management. That is the bill, Mr. Speaker. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, then those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 94 ayes, 1 nay, and 5 members absent or not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2823, exempting buildings or structures utilized exclusively for agricultural purposes from the provisions of the State Building Code.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2914 to remove certain ex officio voting members from the Archives and History Commission and update formatting.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman on the 15th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of House Bill 2914 is to remove certain ex officio voting members of Archives and History Commission and other technical corrections. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 92 ayes, 3 nays, and 5 members absent or not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2914 to remove certain ex officio voting members from the Archives and History Commission and update formatting.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 3130 relating to elimination of sunset provisions concerning towing rates.
Gentleman on the 35th, Delegate Capito.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to amend the bill on third reading.
Gentleman on the 35th, ask unanimous consent to offer an amendment to the bill on third reading. Are there objections? There are no objections. Clerk will report the amendment.
Delegates Capito and Mr. Speaker, Mr. Hanshaw move to amend the bill. This is HFA Capito and Hanshaw, number 3-18.
Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman from the 35th to explain the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill deals with sunset provisions concerning towing rates. The amendment before the body deals with 2 separate issues, and it provides that no rules may be promulgated that would prohibit record companies or which would compel record companies to permit the owner or any designee of that owner to access the towed vehicle until all fees and liens are paid to the record company. And second, rules may not be promulgated that would require a record service to destroy or otherwise dispose of the vehicle which has been abandoned by its owner, provided that the Commission may promulgate rules governing the procedures by which a record company may sell a vehicle which has been abandoned by its owner. That's a summarization of the amendment. I urge its adoption.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Is there debate on the amendment? If not, those in favor of the amendment will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. Chair declares the amendment adopted. Clerk will read the bill a third time.
House Bill 3130 relating to elimination of sunset provision concerning towing rates.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman from the 35th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill amends West Virginia Code to remove the sunset provision on rules promulgated by the PSC relating to tow rates. And it removes a requirement that the legislative auditor shall review the rules promulgated by the PSC under this section and evaluate the rate-making policy for reasonableness, the complaint process for timeliness, the penalties for effectiveness, and other metrics the legislative auditor deems appropriate. Urge passage of the bill as amended.
Was the gentleman from 36 Dugget Row seeking recognition to object to the reading of the bill?
Oh, no, sir.
Or the explanation of the bill? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Gentleman from 36 Dugget Row.
Speaker, a question on the amendment, and it's number 1, permit the registered owner or any person to access their personal items.
I'll yield.
Gentleman does yield.
Yes. So essentially, the problem that we're trying to cure here is that oftentimes these wrecker services will tow a vehicle, and the vehicle may have something in it of value, and somebody may come and try to, get into the vehicle only to take the thing of value, which may in many cases be worth more than the actual vehicle, and then the wrecker company is left with the vehicle with with basically no way to get compensated.
So, but even if it's not valuable information, if it's a wallet or something, the no rule can be promulgated that requires a record company to allow a registered owner or any other person access to the towed vehicle in any manner whatsoever unless and until the owner or his designee has paid the record company.
Until the lien,
that seems harsh.
It would be until the lien's discharged, yes.
Now, is there any requirement that the record company protect the items that are there and left in the vehicle?
There's nothing in this bill that would prohibit the PSC from promulgating rules that require record companies to take certain actions to protect the property in which they're in possession of.
Well, wouldn't it be more proper the jurisdiction of the commission to be allowed to make rules that would be fair both to the property owner and to the record company to assure that items wouldn't be lost or taken inappropriately? But what we're doing is, as I understand your amendment, is to put in code that there cannot be a rule that requires a record company to allow access to personal items of a person until they're in fact paid. And the reality of that, I think, is, if I understand it, is that would be if, let's say, the insurance company was going to pay the record company, there's still some time period there where the owner would be locked out of the vehicle until the record company and his insurance company were satisfied, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you, sir. May I speak briefly to the bill?
Yes, the gentleman is recognized.
I think this is a mistake. I don't think that it's fair for the record company to be able to hold the items that are owned by the person until they're fully paid. I think that there should be also some sort of protection for the owner, that the record company has a requirement that they must maintain and keep safe all of those items if they're not going to turn them over to the owner immediately. So I think we should not pass this bill.
Is there further debate on the bill? Yes, chair is in error. Chair is in error. No, chair's not in error. This is the bill. This is the bill. Question before the House is the passage of the bill. Excuse me. Is there further debate on passage of the bill? If not, the question is, yes, the gentleman from the 28th, Douglas Cooper, is recognized.
So, sir, my question to you is this. If I'm a truck driver and I have a terrible accident on Route 20 over in Summers County, and my rig is being towed to an impound lot, and I owe a terrible wrecker bill, and I'm from Texas, and I need a place to stay, what this bill will do in the end is maybe not allow me to get my shaving kit and whatever else I may need out of the truck just to survive until I can get my insurance company to settle up the wrecker bill.
Well, let me just say this. What this bill does, it prevents the PSC from promulgating rules which would prohibit a wrecker company from taking those actions. There's nothing in this bill that says that a wrecker company would not be able to let you into your truck. All this is saying is that the PSC can't tell the wrecker companies what to do with regard to that.
I speak to that, and maybe I should just speak to the bill, Mr. Speaker. That actually happened over in my county a few years ago, and former Delegate Cadle and I attended a hearing over there about it. But this fellow was from out in Texas and was actually locked out of his truck, and it was locked on an impound lot. And they did do him a favor and took him to a motel all the way over in Beckley, and there he sat until someone thought maybe they should go get him and bring him back to his truck, and they finally did give in, but it just about bankrupted him, just trying to get his personal effects out of this truck. So I'm in a quandary over this bill, to be quite frank.
The gentleman to 61st, Doug Barrett. Is there further debate on the bill? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those members in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 57 ayes, 39 nays, and 4 members absent or not voting. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 3130, relating to elimination of sunset provisions concerning towing rates.
Are there amendments to the title?
Delegate Capito and Mr. Speaker, Mr. Henshaw moves to amend the title.
The question before the House is the title amendment. Those in favor of the title amendment will please say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the title amendment adopted. The title as amended by the House will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Are there further bills on third reading? If not, bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 156, authorizing the Department of Homeland Security to promulgate legislative rules.
Are there amendments?
Committee on Government Organization moves to amend the bill. This is HGO AM number 1.
Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman to 15th to explain the amendment.
There was a committee amendment. I don't believe there was.
Will the clerk report the amendment under consideration?
The Committee on Government Organization moves to amend the bill by striking out everything after the enacting clause and inserting in lieu thereof the following.
It is the committee amendment before the House.
All right, thank you. There was a strike and insert amendment since this was it was a committee amendment, but since this is a Senate bill, it was a strike and insert amendment to the Senate bill. What the amendment does is the amendment corrects a code citation, adds a new subdivision requiring an inspector to have a copy of the code on their person when performing inspection to identify deficiencies more clearly. Finally, the amendment strikes out all of subsection 2.4 from the State of Emergency Response Commission and renumbers the remaining sections.
The question now before the House is the amendment just explained by the gentleman the 15th. Is there debate on the amendment? If not, those in favor of the amendment will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes have the chair declares that amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill, Senate Bill 160, authorizing the Department of Revenue to promulgate legislative rules.
Are there amendments?
Committee on Government Organization moves to amend the bill. This is HGO AM number 1.
Are there objections to having the amendment explained in lieu of having read? If not, the gentleman on the 29th to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This was, again, a strike and assert amendment that was adopted in the committee. The amendment makes two changes. The first is to strike the Municipal Pensions Oversight Board from this bundle, which was the incorrect placement, and move it to another more appropriate bundle. And the second is to correct an authorizing code reference. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Is there debate on the amendment? If not, those in favor of the amendment will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it. The chair declares that amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 182, authorizing miscellaneous agencies and boards to promulgate legislative rules.
Are there amendments?
The Committee on Government Organization that moves to amend the bill. This is HGO AM number 1.
Are there amendments to the amendment?
Delegate Foster moves to amend the amendment. This is AM Foster 3-19 number 1.
Gentleman of the 15th to explain the secondary amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is just a technical correction, changing a code citation from changing two numbers, an 11 to a 22. So.
Question now before the House is the secondary amendment. Is there debate on the secondary amendment? If not, those in favor of the secondary amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The chair declares the secondary amendment adopted. The question now before the House is the primary amendment as amended. Are there objections to having the primary amendment as amended explained in lieu of having read? If not, the gentleman on the 15th to explain the primary amendment as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The strike and insert amendment makes two changes. The first moves the Municipal Pensions Oversight Board from the incorrect revenue bundle and places it over into this bundle. The second change is a fee requested by funeral examiners was dropped from $350 down to $275. I would urge passage.
Is there debate on the primary amendment? If not, those in favor of adoption of the primary amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The chair declares the primary amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2026 relating to the modernization of the collection of income taxes by adopting uniform provisions relating to the mobile workforce.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2796, supplemental appropriation bill, is to expire funds to the surplus balance of general revenue and to supplement an increase in item of appropriation to the aforesaid account for the designated spending unit for expenditure during fiscal year 2021.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2829, providing for the amortization of annual funding deficiencies for municipal police or firefighters' pension and relief funds.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2897, expiring funds to the balance of the Department of Commerce.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2899, making a supplementary appropriation to the Department of Commerce.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2920, making a supplementary appropriation to the Department of Health and Human Resources Division of Health Laboratory Services Fund.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Are there further bills on second reading? If not, bills on first reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 9, continued licensed racetrack modernization fund.
The bill will be advanced.
Senate Bill 10, modifying racetrack licensing due date.
The bill will be advanced.
Senate Bill 305, providing exemption from consumer sales and service tax for certain aircraft maintenance.
The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2195, relating to motor vehicle crash reports.
The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2368, Melissa Smith's Law, creating patient visitation privileges.
The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2760, relating to economic development incentive tax credits.
The bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2874, extend the current veterans business fee waivers to active duty military members, their spouses, and immediate family members.
The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2933, Anti-Discrimination Against Israel Act.
The bill will be advanced.
House Bill 3010 to extend the special valuation method for cellular towers to towers owned by persons not subject to regulation by the Board of Public Works.
The bill to be advanced. Are there further bills on first reading? If not, leaves of absence. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our colleagues, Delegate Ellington and Kessinger.
Are there objections to leaves of absence being granted? Gentleman from the 13th object? If not, leaves of absences shall be granted. Introductions? Gentleman from the 13th?
Yes, sir, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Our colleague, Delegate Adam Burkhammer, was with us for the majority of the day today, and our members will notice that he is not on the House floor as we speak. And the purpose of him having to be excused from the House floor is because his father-in-law lies on his deathbed. And I would ask that the House join me, please. Very unexpected situation. I would ask that the House would join me in a moment of silence and prayer for Mr. Dwayne Lips.
Chair would ask all members and guests in the galleries to please stand to observe a brief moment of silence. Members and guests may be seated. Miscellaneous business. If not, lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, subject to announcements, that the House adjourn until 11 a.m. Monday, March 22nd.
Are there announcements? Gentleman from the 32nd, Doug Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Judiciary will resume today at 3:15 p.m. in the Judiciary Room. We will resume our established agenda. Also, your Committee on Judiciary will meet Monday morning in the Judiciary Committee Room at 9:30 a.m. and the agenda will be posted.
Lady from the 49th, Douglas Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Rules will meet at 10:45 Monday morning in House Education.
Gentleman 13th, Douglas Higginbotham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will meet Monday, March 22nd at 1 p.m. in the House chamber. The agenda will be posted.
The gentleman the 15th, Douglas Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Government Organization Committee will not meet today. We will not meet today, but we will have a meeting at 1 p.m. on Monday. So 1 p.m. on Monday in House Government Organization Committee room.
The gentleman 36, Douglas Pritt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Judiciary Subcommittee on House Bill 3106 will meet on Monday at 1:30 p.m. Thank you.
Are there further announcements? If not, the question is on the motion that the House adjourn at 11 a.m. on Monday. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. The House is adjourned at 11 a.m. on Monday.